Yep, it's on YouTube now.
John Spear, are you hiding?
Owen, can you hear me?
I can.
I can, yep.
Okay, good.
Question for the participants. Has anyone been on a Zoom meeting with someone whose name is Una Bomber?
You mean
Because
like
I have this person, yeah, they're in the waiting room, and it's UNA, as in Una, and then last name BOMBER, and with that name to go off of, I really don't feel comfortable letting that person in. I didn't know if
The Unabomber.
oh yeah, and so I just didn't know if someone else had been on, knows this person. Oh, it's Sandy down the road or whoever. So
Wouldn't
good.
let
I
them
will
on. It's a
not
distasteful-
let them in.
It's distasteful joke, so I would not let them in.
Button is supposed to touch speak.
I don't know. Owen,
Yes.
where is the button that we select if we want to say something during the meeting?
I think you found it.
So we'll go over this when we start. Walter will go over it.
Okay.
But what I'll be doing is I'll be doing my best at keeping everyone muted, and then Walter can see all the participants just like I can. We'll do our best at monitoring if people have a question that they want to ask, and then we'll ask that participant to unmute them, or I can unmute them. But for the most part, we're going to ask that folks stay muted. And I can do it, but if you want to do it yourself, it's the little microphone icon.
Yep,
and
I see it.
it's red and has a slash through, then you're muted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Hey, Walter? Walter?
Oh, I got muted by accident, huh?
I just wanted to let you know before we start that I'm not going to be in physical attendance tomorrow night. I'll join by Zoom. I'm just getting too nervous with all the growth in cases.
I'm right with you. I'm not, the only in-person meeting I'm going to attend for the foreseeable future is the special town meeting. So I have to start over again. So I ask that the audience remain muted. When it comes time for questions, if you go to the participant icon on your screen, if you have a laptop, it should be at the bottom. If you have an iPad, it should be at the top. And I don't know what a phone looks like. And you click on that, you will see that there's a list of the participants and there's an option for you to raise your hand. So please do that. And Owen, would you keep score of the order in which people raise their hands so I can recognize them in that order?
I will do my best at that. Not all meeting participants show up, so I have to scroll back and forth. The hand does pop up, but maybe it puts it in order.
Okay. So I accidentally muted myself. So let me go back to the two instructions that we gave to Gartley and Dorsey. That the select board requests that the engineer develop and present an alternative option or options for the north area that would still relocate the road away from the lobster pound to some extent and improve sight lines, but would minimize ledge removal, particularly subsurface ledge removal. Number 4, the select board requests that the engineer develop and present an alternative option or options for the south area that would still improve the village road intersection, but would consider concerns that have been or may be expressed by the owners of the abutting property. The board has not discussed the plans that we received from Gartley and Dorsey in consideration of the promise that we made on that, number 1, and also were we to do that outside of a public meeting, we'd be violating the meeting law. So John or Jan, do you have any color or comments to add? By the way, at the end of the meeting, the board may or may not make motions depending upon what they hear tonight.
Jan, do you have anything? I have a couple comments I'd like to make.
No, I have nothing further to add. Thank you, Walter.
Okay. 2, and just a minor technical detail, a couple of people have referred to the October 1st meeting as a town meeting. I don't want to get too technical, but that was not a legal town meeting. It was a select board meeting. And I just think that's important for people to understand. The second thing is I wanted to re-emphasize what Walter just said, that we have not discussed these revised plans amongst ourselves or with the engineer. We're just hearing them tonight for the first time. We saw them basically when you saw them, when everybody saw them. And the instructions that Walter was referring to were actually part of the motion on October 1st. They weren't something we developed after that October 1st meeting. And then thirdly, I understand that there may be some professional folks joining us tonight on Zoom, in particular, a lawyer and an engineer. We got a rather lengthy letter from a lawyer this afternoon, late, as well as a lengthy letter from an engineer, very late. I really haven't had time to even read them. I just got back in close to the start of this meeting. But I would ask, since I've heard lots of different comments about this proposed project that differ and are in conflict with one another, it would be very helpful to me if these professionals could identify who they are representing rather than just this sort of, I'm representing a group of people because I'm getting different comments about different aspects of this project. So that would be very helpful. So with that, I'll
change your name.
Yes, by name. Because I'm getting different comments from different people. And when someone comes to a meeting and says, I'm representing these people, I'd like to know when that's classified as a group, I mean, who is that? I would ask that of the lawyer and the engineer if they speak.
Lisa Robinson is on from GEI Consultants, I believe.
Yes, good evening.
Okay. Andrew, it's your show for the time being, and you should screen share the documents that you're going to share. Owen will enable you to do that. I trust that you know how to operate screen sharing.
I think we are already there.
In the world of COVID, if you can't do that, then I don't know how you've been making a living.
My name is Andrew Hedrick. I am a civil engineer from Gartley and Dorsey. Just to give you all the background of myself. So kind of reiterating, we've been tasked with reassessing the two road sections along Island Road based on the last meeting and to incorporate the feedback that we received, as well as assuring that we are minimizing costs and making sure the scope of the project did not creep, if you will. So going back, I'm going to start with the intersection of Village Road and Island Road first. So what I'll put up in front of you here is the original plan that we put forward. Well, I shouldn't say original, but here's the last plan that we sent forward back in June, which some of the comments that we received, but actually backing up, here's the Island Road alignment in this section. Here's the intersection of Village Road as it impacts it. These maroon lines are the drainage that we're proposing to put a couple of pipes in there. Along the edge here is wetland area, and here's the shoreline and the existing riprap along the front there. The blue lines that we present on the plan are the existing contours that were shot by our surveyors, and we have not put any proposed contours on this plan or the old plan. But this is the old one still. And what we did is we put some spot elevations in here. The red shows the proposed grade, and the blue shows the existing grade, just to kind of give a comparison for this section. So some of the concerns that we received, which I already addressed, was the length of the road had been extended. So we looked a little closer at that. This was just a graphical representation. We haven't done any finished grading. We haven't done any final grades. So we showed the approximate length where we thought it would extend. We have reduced that area. As you can see, here's the one in behind. So we did reduce that area to shorten it up after looking at the grades where we could tie things back in. So I did the same thing along Village Road here, where we had this extended down all the way to the pier. But looking at it a little closer, we were able to shorten that as well to kind of pull the impact back. That was one of the big concerns, and the majority of the concerns seem to stem from this landscape area here and a walkway. We had shown a shoulder along the road to extend down, and then we detached the shoulder and used it as kind of a walkway along the shorefront and created an island. It didn't seem to be necessary based on a number of the comments we received, or at least the majority, should I say. So what we did is we went back to more of a traditional.
Can we move into the other room?
Yeah.
Traditional situation where we put the edge of the shoulder directly along the road where it should be anyways, and we didn't detach it and create the walkway through this the island area here. So to speak of the shoulder, the roads are designed to be 22 feet wide. This is in accordance with AASHTO for this road speed and road volume. They're 22 feet wide. That means 11-foot travel lanes with a 4-foot shoulder on each side. It's necessary to meet those standards, and that's what we've done for the sections that we are making improvements. So we have done just that. So here's the proposed plan right here. We shortened those sections to kind of run through them again. We did increase this radius a little bit from what we had before. I know there's a concern to make sure we maintain or allow the trailer trucks to leave the road and enter it from Island Road to make sure their lives are not made overly difficult. So I did take that into consideration. I think adding the shoulder back to this side widening this radius out. And we can still widen that a little bit more if there's still some concern about making that happen. But I also put on this plan to show you what the WD-40 trailer truck would look like exiting this road onto. So this is the path as it leaves onto Island Road. You can see it would go over the shoulder or into the center line. The most likely scenario is the truck will wait for no traffic and it'll swing out and stay on the pavement and then transition down, which is common for a 90-degree intersection like that. This is the same thing in reverse. They can, exit Island Road and straight onto Village Road and stay primarily in their lane without having to swing over and impact the other lane. There's a little bit of room here. It's just a graphical representation, but the critical thing is just to show that swing that it can make it around the corner here. In no scenario does a large truck, are they able to make a 90-degree turn back onto Village Road with or without this large intersection. Even if this was all pavement, they still would not be able to swing and make it. This is the most likely the tightest turn they would make. This only makes it sharper. So they can't exit this way as it currently, and they cannot exit and go south down that road either. I'm sorry, west down that road either. So what we did is we looked at those, made sure we maximized the likely path for those, and we incorporated those into this section. We're still maintaining about a 1.75 foot increase in the road for this section only. When I say an increase, it's only in the low sections. We're going to basically take the low section of the road, we're going to raise it to the minimum of about 11.5 feet, and then we're going to taper it back into the existing section. So there's some in here that we're just going to maintain. We're going to pick up the lower section of the road, and we're going to taper it back in to blend things. So this, as you can see, this is at about 10. So this line may end up, being stretched, but it's not like we're going to be fully rebuilding that whole section of road. We're just going to be removing some pavement, lifting it up a few inches so that we can get our road elevation to balance in. Because this area right here was identified going all the way back by the Wood Environmental, who identified this area as being prone to flooding. So what that means in summary for both of them is prone to flooding is they've identified those two areas as being close to the flood zone and close to the highest annual tide for those sections. So just as a quick recap, here's the Wood Environmental report. We go down a couple pages here. This is what they presented to the town. Here's present day scenario. The highest annual tide is at elevation 6.8. This is current. And they basically determined that there's a 1% chance that the still water elevation will reach 9, which is at the road elevation it currently is. And then if you incorporate waves into that situation, you can get up to flooding in 11. And that was the information that was given to us too, is that there was an experience of flooding in this lower section here that you had seen. It doesn't happen often, but you do see it in these sections. So we needed to elevate those sections. The same is true for the Lobster Pound area, the LL Point section, where they identified it. And here it is. You can see that the low elevations are 9, and we're at that elevation currently. So the direction they gave is you can raise the road. They wanted you to raise the road 2 to 3 feet or up to 4 feet to accommodate all these storm events. The short-term storm event is 2030 is what they're predicting. So they're estimating that the sea level is going to rise by a foot in this area over the next 10 years. So what that means is it brings your HAT up a foot, and then it raises that 1% chance of flooding to 10, which would currently be well over the low points of the road. And they did the same thing for the 50-year down to 2050 and 2085. So the direction the board gave us looking at these numbers is to make an adjustment, see if we can increase the road to try to hit a target somewhere that would be affordable in the middle of these two storms here, while making the road safe enough to be stable if we do get the floods and we do get the storm, and that 1% chance actually hits. The key thing is making sure we can maintain emergency vehicles through there, and making sure that the fishermen and the commercial use can still make it through there during these flash storms and these scenarios. So That's what the town received a grant for, was to bring the road up to make sure that we can maintain it during those scenarios. And what we've looked at is about 1.75 feet, which you can see is somewhere in the middle of these two. So if you want to project it, not directly, but if you're looking at like a 2040 scenario, you stretch this out about 20 years. Again, sea level projection is such a tough thing to do, but the primary thing to take away is that the road currently is in a flooding scenario. Everybody, I think, in the town's aware of that. So raising the road a foot, foot and a half to almost up to 2 feet in those areas will greatly benefit that section and make sure it's traversable through that time. So looking at this section, I think I've identified most of these areas. When I did reduce this, our original estimate was about 380 feet of road that we had proposed to improve in this area. And based on what we have here, we're about 350, but I anticipate we'll be this way another 30, 40 feet probably by the time we're done with grading. So we've tried to match that out and balance in exactly what we had before. This area has remained the same. Without the walkway, we still need to come in there and riprap and reset the guardrail and fix this area to make sure that we can accommodate for the increased elevation. I left this area as a landscape island. It can be done, the town can do whatever they want for that. At the end of the day, if they want to pave it and put it back, they can spend the money to do that. Again, I would just highly encourage that we stripe the pattern to narrow this entrance and prevent vehicles from accessing Island Road from this very large, over 100-foot wide curb cut that was desirable by the town. But I highly recommend we revert that or convert that back to close to a 90-degree turn there. So moving down to the next section of our road here. Here's the original section. This is up by the pound area. This shows the road sweep. This shows a lot of the concerns that people have.
Andrew,
here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would you go back to that, what's some people have characterized as an attractive nuisance?
Yeah.
Re-explain what you've done there, or what you just said, because I wasn't following it.
Yeah, so essentially what I have changed for the entire intersection here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've created a T intersection to improve safety and narrow the width. Currently there's a 125-foot wide paved area that is low. So in order to improve the safety for vehicles leaving and accessing Village Road, we need to narrow that up to make it clear where the vehicle is coming from. It'll help improve sight lines because it pulls it up the hill, so you'll be able to see a little bit better. And in addition to that, we have to raise this area. That's the primary goal. So we needed to regrade this entire area anyways. So we eliminated the pavement through this section and are proposing to revegetate that with gravel, grass, or if the town truly wanted to pave it, they could come back and pave it as long as we directed vehicles to the intersection at this location rather than let them traverse across this. There's a shortcut around the corner. It's unsafe to leave it wide open. DOT guidelines force you to narrow your entrance as much as practical, if you will. So that's what we've done. We've left a nice wide opening still to allow a vehicle, a trailer truck, to access that in and out both ways. But we have left this island in here, and this is not a walking path. It's just a gravel shoulder running down both sides of the road. And again, here's the angular rock that we'll end up putting in there to be able to raise that shoreline up in elevation to stabilize the edges here.
Okay, one other question in the write-up that's on the website. Bullet number 2 says impacts along Village Road were further reduced by shortening the impacts.
Yep,
Would you
exactly.
explain what an impact is?
Well, the impact, so again, going back, so these plans that we created here, we tried to hatch, I guess, more or less, we did a guesstimate of where the grading would stop. So here's the original one, or the one back in June. We showed these locations along Island Road, and we showed them along Village Road. So we showed the impacts, and these were just estimated impacts of where the pavement was going to need to be removed and the grading would need to tie in. Knowing that was a big concern because we heard that it's twice the length of the road. We stepped back and looked at the grading a little bit closer to try to ease some concerns regarding that. And I looked at this and it looks like we'll be able to tie the road back in, so our impact should stop a little bit shorter than we previously had. And the same thing along the road here to get that closer to representing what we originally estimated and included in our scope of work.
Okay, thanks.
Certainly. You finally moving on to the lobster pound area?
Lead on, McDuff.
All right, here we go. So here is, going back, here's the original plan that we presented. A number of the concerns that we received during the meeting, or I shouldn't say concerns, but a number of the items we discussed is probably a better way to put it, is the elimination of the curve. The existing road has a nice curve to it. It bends around there. Let's see if I can show you exactly what it looks like. So here's the existing road. Here's the existing survey plan. There's a little bit of an S-turn to it. This is the ledge location right here. The ledge is, about 5 to 6 feet higher than the adjacent road there on the top of the ledge. So it's quite a big chunk of ledge, a knob there. Here's the lobster pound that we discussed. Here's a couple of the driveways that are in close proximity to this. And there's a well that doesn't show up on this plan. Maybe it does. Nope. There's a well at least somewhere back in this area off the road. So there's a well back here, and we think there's another one over in these locations. So some of the concerns that we received was the straightening of the road was discussed. That wasn't ideal, so we have corrected that. We went back through the design and we adjusted the road alignment to essentially pull off I call this the pond area, to pull off the pond area and off the ledge. So using some of the recommendations that were kind of group thought of at the meeting, we tried to incorporate or maintain the S that you currently have. So for this road volume, this road speed, the minimum center line radius is about 250 feet. So using that, we're kind of keeping that in our back pocket and making sure we maintain that. That was the minimum radius that we wanted to implement here. The existing radius actually is 250 feet. So we were able to keep the same radius of 250 feet. For that, we just realigned the road. So here, this section right here is the edge of the existing road. You can see it's about 2 feet off the edge of where the guardrail is. It's really close, and then you have the riprap and rock associated with that. So we pulled the new edge of the road, which is the dark or black lines here. We pulled those 5 or 6 feet away from the pound area. What that will allow us to do is to raise the elevation and do all our grading above where the guardrail is, above where all the riprap is, and then we'll put that all back together. Obviously, the guardrail will be reset along this section in its proper location. And the red line here is the shoulder, actually, the proposed shoulder. So we'll still maintain that same 4-foot shoulder on both sides of the road through this section. So kind of maintaining that S curve. We did the same thing on this side. So here's the ledge. Looking back, you can see this is where the ledge was before. Maybe you can see it. This is where the ledge was before. We ran right over the top of it, trying to improve sight lines, trying to open that up. But we quickly learned that was not an ideal situation and not as desirable as we originally intended it to be or thought it would be. So we went back to the drawing board to say, okay, how do we avoid the ledge impacts to the greatest extent we can? And how do we achieve what we need to for sight lines, for mobility around the rock without creating a dangerous situation? So this is where what we came up with is we're about 10 feet off. So here's the edge of the road. Here's the edge of the existing road. And this is about a 4-foot face of ledge right here. So again, it's not ideal, but it's been in existence for a very long time. So we're only going to improve the situation by pulling off it rather than remove it, as I originally had planned. So what we did here is we pulled off that. Like I said, we're about 10 feet from the edge of that. I did have to increase the radius, or make it sharper, should I say. The proposed radius for this curve that runs this way is 300. And it used to be 400, so it was a little flatter, so it actually creates more of that S to help with the speed and help control things. I'll get into the extending beyond the raw portion here and kind of going through that in a little bit here. But one of the things I wanted to focus on was ledge. So we've highlighted a little section of ledge that we anticipate may need to be removed. I say that because we haven't gone through the exercise of finalizing grading. So generally in design projects like this, you create a plan, you create preliminary plans, you find out where the road wants to be, and then you start looking at your finished grading. Again, we put the spot elevations to show proposed centerline elevation and existing to help everybody see what we're proposing to do. So in this one, you actually can see that we're proposing to lower the road. The same is true as we go down this road. We know the Lobster Pound has difficulties. They have a very steep driveway there. There's vehicles in and out. So we were going to use the opportunity to lower that grade along this section to help their access and to clean up the road transition through there. But looking at what we did to this ledge here is, so we show it as proposed because we haven't finished the final grading. In an ideal situation, we can leave the entire section of ledge alone. But we do want to get some drainage in here. We do want to do some grading and pull some water away. But there's a lot of concern, mine as well. I mean, there was discussions about damage to the wells and how sensitive that region is. And there's a lot of nice property down there. Oh, here's the well right there. That have access to these wells, and in these saltwater intrusion locations, they are very sensitive. And well, we are quite a ways away from there, and we are pretty confident that blasting would not impact those wells. We have eliminated that from the equation altogether to try to ease some concerns. So this red we show here most likely will be able to be done. It's too small of an area to blast, first and foremost. And secondly, we do it with a hammer if required. So it'd be basically kind of going along the edge of the face there and pulling what we can off for grading purposes with a large hammer attached to an excavator to minimize any potential damage to these wells in this location. So hopefully everybody will find that be very amenable to that approach there. Going back to the entrances, there was a lot of concern with regard to grading around the entrances. The one surprise that this wasn't expressed, we had an entrance that was proposed along the center, along the center of the existing U entrance. But we were informed during the meeting by some of the people that use this is that the site distance is not a concern, and they've never really had concerns with the site distance, which was one of my primary concerns or primary reasons for removing this ledge. As we pull this road away, it creates or reduces the site distance going down this edge. So that's why we wanted to remove the ledge, was to improve that so you could see and have a nice wide site distance for that. So that being said, we listened to that, we heard that, so we left the proposed entrance alone, the existing entrance alone. We just sort of realigned it to match up with the new edge of road. So you can see here's where the old entrance was. We kind of shifted it back a little bit. But looking at this little graphic up above, what we wanted to do was look at where the site distance was running through there. So you can see if we kind of target some cars coming around the corner, we wanted to make sure the critical thing is at that speed, 35 miles an hour, the stopping site distance is 250 feet. So we wanted to make sure we could maintain that site distance so somebody pulling out there, this vehicle could see them in time and stop adequately. As you go up in speed, obviously that distance increases. So knowing that there was a potential for higher rates of speed along this section, we wanted to make sure we had even higher than that. We were shooting for having like a 300, 350 site distance. That's what this shows, is if we remove the ledge, we'd be able to increase that sight line. But regardless, leaving it in its current location, you can see that we have about 260 feet to the next vehicle coming around the edge. And we did the same thing. We checked the sight distance in this curve because they would be the ones closest to that ledge, and they would have the restricted sight kind of in the belly of that curve, if you will. So we did the same thing. We checked those sight distance, and both of them were above the 250 feet that were required. So we were comfortable to kind of leave that entrance in its current location and just simply regrade the road. So here's the lowest section of the road that we're proposing to raise. You can see the existing grade, you can see the proposed grade. you know, it's like 1.75 feet, somewhere in some change there, a couple of tenths. And then we transitioned down into the driveway. So here's where we blend that driveway back in, and then here's where we elevate that. So this driveway will come up about a foot, which will indeed help with some sight lines. Looking down, it's sort of in a hole now, so it'll help with some sight lines as you go around that. The same is true on this side. I know there was concerns that we were going to build a road and there'd be a ramp at the end of the driveway. But here we are on the road, 9.5, the center line of the proposed road. 11 is what we're proposing it to be, so there's about 1.5 feet. And then we make a gentle transition across the road and down into the driveway. We're somewhere between 2 and 3% to make that happen, and then we tie back in at this location approximately. Again, the grading will be refined once we get to that next step, and we generally have an acceptable road location. But I will remind everybody that you know, this is what we do. We kind of go through these designs, we get the road about where it is, and then if we start running into some grading issues, once we get to that final stage, if you will, then we start moving things slightly here and there. But generally, we kind of try to nail that center line down and make everybody aware of where it's going to be before we take the next steps and get into those design details that are time consuming and involve a lot of technical review. And we do that primarily to try to keep costs down during these planning stages so that we can bounce plans back and forth. We can do it efficiently and cost effectively, and come up with a plan that makes everything work before we go into full design, full cross sections, and you know, identifying where all these items are going to be. So it's just a good way to kind of start the planning to get going here. So this driveway, the Lobster Pound, it's really tight to the building. We had hoped to pull it away from it, but based on where the ledge is, and I think we have the ability to move this a couple more feet, maybe another foot back towards the island road, or back towards the ledge, if you will. We just need to refine this radius here. But for what we have right now, we are encroaching into that existing paved area. I have seen some recent photographs that show there's lobster traps in here. There's trucks that park right along the edge here. So we need to work with them to assess the situation and what they can live with, what they're amenable to. Part of the reasoning for lowering this road was to improve their access. And if they have a flatter access off the road, maybe they could give up a couple of feet in this section. So this little triangle right here is about 200 square feet. And on this end, it's about 4.5 feet deep. So it'll be taking about 4.5 feet from the current parking, although the parking is directly along the edge of Island Road. That's definitely not an ideal situation where they currently park. But I just wanted to point out that that was an encroachment into their property to make all of this happen. Speaking of property, I will kind of use that as a segue. So there is no defined right of way.
Andrew,
yes.
Andrew, only just because it's one of the board members, Walter. You know, for the other participants from the public, we just asked that Andrew complete his presentation. But for board members that have questions, if it's all right, I'll interject, and I think Walter.
Please.
Yeah, just if you have it in your head, because it doesn't appear to be on the two diagrams, there were two triggering washouts, and I actually do want to go back to where this all started. It's much less about the sea level rising in 2030 than it is the impact of what seemed to be more frequent and severe storms. And there were two washouts in 18 and 19 that really triggered this entire adventure. Do you know exactly where they are? Can you show us on the map?
I know the major one.
And if not, maybe Betty can help you out.
So the one that I've always been focused in was in this location where there was water that inundated the edge of the road. It was up into the road area, but this was the primary area of concern.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Can I say something?
Could I ask a question?
Sure. Go ahead, John.
Andrew, you said that, I'm talking about Maine Coast Seafood now. You said that that little triangle would be into their property. but yet you show the right of way as being much, much deeper. So did you misspeak?
I didn't misspeak. I was just getting into the property rights before we went into questions here. So
Okay, so so I guess my question is, I assume that you were not able to find an exact right-of-way line and you're going by the abandoned, sounds like you're gonna explain it, so go ahead.
yes, absolutely. So
Okay,
So what we have here is there is no existing established right-of-way for this road. The state of Maine has it at either ends of the road. That's been clearly defined. But through this section, there is no clearly defined right-of-way. So what that means is the town, because it's a town way, has a 3-rod right from where the existing road is. So what that means, 3 rods is about 50 feet, it's 49.5 feet. And you measure that from the center line of the existing traveled way out. So this is in a perceived, basically, right-of-way, presumptive, if you will, is the correct term, I believe, for where that right-of-way is. What this is, this rock portion, so once you don't have a right-of-way, then you have to break that back. This is, again, I will kind of preamble this with, this is a surveyor's expertise and an attorney's expertise. I am simply a civil engineer explaining our design over these areas, and we will definitely need them to kind of provide their legal opinions. But the way I understand this is, so a rock portion of a road, a rock portion, is where the road currently, what the road currently occupies, including the side slopes, the ditching associated with it, basically the area that would be required if you had to maintain the road for the town. If they had to come in here and excavate along the edge of the road, they would have the ability to go back and fill back into where the side slope or ditching currently exists. So what our surveyors were tasked with was defining where that rock portion of road was. And as you can see, when you're in a paved section, it's very difficult to identify where that is because it runs along where really the travel lane is. When you get into a fill slope or a cut slope, it basically runs back to where the grading is. So it's this brown line that extends out to the edge of the slope is where the rock portion, and what that is the town already has an existing easement for that area. They can utilize that area for the road. They can do maintenance in that area to their heart's content, if you will. When we go beyond that, regardless of where the right-of-way is, that is a portion of land that is not currently being used by the town for their road. Therefore, they have to work with the landowner to make sure the value that they are losing is properly provided to the landowner, or they're basically paid for, or an agreement's made between the landowner of the new encroachment because the road does not currently exist there. They have to pay damages, I think is the technical term. And Maine DOT has a 600-page right-of-way manual, and there's probably about 50 pages in it to deal with the rock portion and land acquisitions and transfers and easements to deal with this scenario in particular. I will kind of mention that we've utilized this in a similar scenario where a road is outside the right-of-way, and a lot of times there's no damages rewarded or received because you can offset them with improvements, and it was an unusable piece of land. I'm not sure that's the case here. I won't put that out there, but I know that's the scenario or the results. A lot of times it's not like a large check is handed to an abutting landowner because we're now using some land that they really couldn't use well anyways. But that's the definition. That's my 2-cent definition of the rock portion versus where we have the prescribed right-of-way. So that's the difference. So you have the rights within that right-of-way, but you still have to be the owner of the land has to be compensated for the revised easement area that you're going to now use for road or drainage or whatever you need to do for this section. So kind of backing up, I think the last thing on my list here, there may be a few other ones here, but one of the things we did is we also looked at this again. We had the road extended. You can see we've had some of those improvements extended quite a bit down past the parking and well up past our the driveway, the second driveway up in here. But we looked at the grading. and we decided we could tie these back in a little bit closer and try to minimize the amount of fill. Again, knowing that we have some of that flexibility to raise the road somewhere between a foot and a half to 2 feet, trying to minimize what the town is paying for at this point in time, knowing that the predictive models, it's tough to predict, if you will. We do know that sea level is rising. The amount is the tough thing that I will leave to somebody else to calculate, but they have indicated that it's going to go up basically a foot over the next 10 years and 2 over the next 30 years. So we have kind of hit the target in the middle there. Same thing as here. We're only pulling that up to about 10.4, what it currently is. But the flood elevation right now is closer to 9, so we'd still be up above that. We'd be able to keep this high and dry. And the plan is to stabilize all these areas along the shoulders, so that in the event that we get a flash flood in 20 years and wave action associated with that, those 1%ers, when the waves are coming up into the road or over the road, it'll be stable, so that once the water subsides, the road won't be washed away. We'll have it all armored and protected and able to take the water on and let it go back and drain away from that. But I think for those 2 sections of road, that's really what we've done. I'm sure there's a number of comments that I didn't specifically address, and I apologize if I left one of your comments out. But we did try to hear everything that everybody said. We did take into consideration, we looked at the money. I tried to get this back closer to what the original estimate was that was put together over a year ago. Of course, now that we're into a pandemic, who knows what construction costs are going to be. We've seen them all over the board, high, low. We do know everybody is busy, surprisingly, mysteriously. All the contractors out there seem to be very busy, so prices are always going up. But for the most part, we tried to get that back in line, get the scope where it needed to be. And again, these are preliminary plans, schematic. I even put it on the plan just to make sure, knowing that things are going to move around. We still have time to take in consideration additional concerns. But either way, we most likely will need to work with this landowner to address acquiring or revising the easement. It's not land owned, to the best of our knowledge. It's an easement the town has. We'd have to adjust the easement location to accommodate this extra width, while working with them to make sure that they can live without this extra thing if we offer them, maybe some adjustments in grade here, or see what they truly need to work with them. But my goal was to minimize the ledge, maintain that S curve to keep the speed down, and kind of act as a deterrent for those higher speeds, while achieving all the goals that were originally set out for this.
John?
Just one question, Andrew. I want to make sure I heard this right. You said that this revised plan eliminates any blasting. Is that correct?
It does. The way we have it laid out, I think we can successfully complete this. We don't know what's in the ground directly adjacent to that, but we pulled the road away from it 10 feet in the anticipation that the ledge does not pop up underneath that. But in those scenarios, we removed all blasting. So yes, to kind of go around about that, we do not anticipate we will need blasting, but I do believe that we will use hammer. We will have to break up the ledge along the edge if we get into the scenarios where the ledge pops back up in close proximity to the road, to make sure we can get adequate drainage in there. So we can achieve that. The one thing that, going back to what we had originally proposed with that ledge briefly, is when we pulled this driveway down, this road away from the pond area, it reduces the sight lines. So that was our way of trying to correct that, by was removing the ledge, increasing or flattening this curve out. Again, going back to this scenario, if this car was up where it currently was, the sight distance would be about 280, 290 feet to a car coming around the ledge in its current location. So we are going to reduce the sight distance from that driveway, but it's still at a tolerable, allowable sight distance. And I think we can minimize the ledge removal along the edge there.
Walter, if I could.
Jen, are you?
Yeah.
Hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, Andrew, you talked about the need to move the road away from the pond. And maybe that's what Betty was going to talk to our emergency management director. The other issue has been for some time that the road is actually being undermined along the pond, and the road is sinking into the pond on that side. I think a combination of the heavy traffic and just the water undermining it, the hydraulics involved. So there was another, I mean, even if there wasn't the storm issues or the rising sea level, we've got, serious erosion under there that we've got to mitigate.
Absolutely, and by pulling it away from the pond area, it allows us to minimize the cost or keep the cost down, because right here, if we start impacting the top of this slope, we have to follow it all the way down to the base and essentially start from here and build up. By pulling the road off and buying some room in here, we can basically take the top few feet off, assess what's in there, put some geotechnical separation fabric in there to make sure that the material doesn't move through there, and then build up along the top of that section, because we'll have a couple of feet of room and clearance in here to make those adjustments, rather than having to go all the way down into the resource, into the water, and then where you stop along the shoreline is it starts spreading quickly, because if you start impacting the riprap all the way down to elevation 0 here, you can see it's going to stretch all the way around this cove. So ideally, we wanted to minimize the impacts to that cove, the impacts of this, and be able to deal with all the stuff we see on the surface up close, and then build up from there after we get it stabilized and secured.
Thank you. I just wanted to be able to point that out.
Okay. All right. So now we'll go out to the audience, and John Koffel, how do I pronounce your name, John? You can unmute yourself now. He's had his hand up from the get-go, so you're recognized.
Thank you, Walter. I'd like to go back to what is the north end of the construction, please, the drawing. Could Andrew put that up, please? Can you, Andrew?
Yes, it's up.
Can you put up now it is, yeah. Okay. North, the Huidong segment, please. There you go. Okay, I was the person who asked for the truck diagram. I asked for a 48-foot trailer. This is a truck that has a total length of 40 feet. Total length. Trailer is a pup trailer. It's a UPS trailer. So I'm not sure that the intersection as designed supports the fishing economy. This is a very essential route for bait, for fuel, and for lobsters. And it's been modified to the point where it's really not usable. And the drawing, frankly, shows it. It's the WB62 truck. It's a typical truck. So if it is not consistent with the grant. I also would want to say that under sustainability in the grant, Walter, are you speaking or me?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. Okay. Reconstruction will be designed to address future seawater level changes and eliminate the need for future reconstruction. Eliminate the need for future reconstruction. The plan that's presented really meet about 8 years of predicted sea level rise. we're not really, we're shortchanging ourselves. And the construction areas have been reduced so greatly that you're actually creating flood level opportunities in the existing road, both at the Huidonks and at the end of the Lobster Pound segment. So you've shortened it, but you're not really addressing the need. So anyway, my question is about the truck, basically.
So the truck radius for a 62-foot truck, that truck can still make this turn. They have an inside radius, a centerline radius of about 41 feet versus 36 feet. So we're not talking a substantial difference. I can put that turning radius on this intersection if you truly believe that your 62-foot long truck, those interstate trucks are driving down through this intersection on a regular basis. It's going back to this intersection. I know there's been a strong pushback to leave a 125-foot wide curb cut in this location. We're not trying to impact the trailer trucks. We see those type of trucks, even the 62-footers, make a 90-degree turn at a 90-degree intersection if needed around this, as long as they have adequate room. They can maneuver these things pretty efficiently. Again, we're not trying to create a scenario that hampers them or makes it difficult. We believe with a 40-foot inside radius, which is more than the centerline radius needed for one of those trailer trucks, is a sufficient job at opening that radius up. We can further open this up. We can add another 10 feet if that's the direction the town wants to go. But my goal is to try to narrow this section up as much as reasonable. I got my scale ratio here, but I just was gonna measure across that real quick here, just to kind of show you what we have for footage along the intersection of that road. So right now, yeah, so we're sitting at 60 feet across for a road opening. Generally speaking, if you went to DOT, they'd be forcing you down somewhere in like the 40-foot range, 50-foot range max with these large radiuses. So we're well above what DOT would put in that intersection. I know it's an odd backwards sort of entrance, but the vehicles leaving Island Road to access Village Road will be, unaffected by this. They might have to slow down a little bit because they can't take this corner and go straight up Village Road, but they can easily make that turn. And then this driver leaving.
And show yourself. Can you show all the people?
It may impact the road as we transition.
Be careful what you say now. Okay. To kind of briefly address the flooding scenario, the primary concern is Island Road. Island Road is the one that received the grant. Island Road is the one that we have to be aware, because that is the access way through there for the commercial entities, for the emergency vehicles. If a section of Village Road down here gets flooded, it is what it is at that point in time, but the primary concern is to be able to have access through here. That's what the grant money is focused on. Raising this intersection here necessitated looking at realignments here, since we have to impact this entire area due to how construction happens. The fact that we're going to raise this section up 1.5 foot, 1.25 foot, actually more like 1.75 feet there. So you end up with the road section in here, and you do your grading and your riprap along the edge here. So it necessitates impacting this. So if we want to pave this area back, we can. It'll probably be about $5,000 or $6,000 to give a nice wide radius to those trucks. But I will reiterate that it's a dangerous intersection when you have a road section that's well up over 100 feet.
And Andrew, the next question is from Sharon.
Yes.
So Sharon, go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you for waiting.
Hello.
Hello.
I guess the first thing I want to say is I feel like no offense, the engineer was at a different meeting than I was at on October 22nd. I heard 90 people come to a meeting and no one spoke in favor of turning this road into a T. In fact, people were very specific that we wanted a minimum build design that left the road as it was. I'm not seeing how changing that road to a T has anything to do with the grant money or storm surge or raising the road. And the road has no history of being unsafe, which seems to be the catchphrase for we want to do it this way. I guess nobody has answered, why do we need to change the layout of that road at all? Why do we need to spend money to do that? It doesn't have anything to do with the grant.
So can I interject?
Of course.
And Andrew, just before you get started, I don't want to take up much time, but just Sharon, I did have 5 separate professional engineers look at that site, and all 5 of them agreed that a reorganization more in a T-type fashion would be the best for safety. 3 of those were traffic engineers.
Nobody has proved that it's unsafe. There's no documentation. There's no record of being unsafe. I mean, I understand that you've told people that you want this design, and now we're kind of creating reasons for it, but there is no unsafe history there.
So unsafe, so Maine DOT directs any entrance to a certain width and a certain alignment. They would not approve or permit an entrance like this in any situation.
We already have an entrance like that.
What was that?
We have an entrance like that. We have a fork in
You
the
have
road.
an existing entrance that doesn't meet current standards. So to make a safer intersection, you try to narrow based on definition, based on guidelines, based on DOT. You try to narrow the entrance as much as feasible to still allow your traffic to traverse, so you can identify where the vehicles may be pulling out. And I've witnessed this myself using this road quite often. With a vehicle coming down this road, a vehicle can be, a vehicle can be anywhere in that section through these areas. So meaning a car can be parked basically in a 100-foot section when you have this intersection. They could turn here quickly to make the quick turn, or they could be down here. So to put somebody's eye line to have to pick up 150 feet of a wide entrance is more dangerous than identifying where the vehicle is going to be coming from. I'm confident that this intersection, whether it is the way we have it now or whether we refine this further to further open this up, we can easily make a 62-foot wide semi-trailer access in and out of here without causing them any heartburn or concern, without making them upset. It will still fix it. It will adjust that intersection. And the whole realignment is coming around the fact that we have to impact this entire area. This area will be removed, regraded, and elevated regardless of the scenario. Whether we have this paved or not, we have to impact this area. This is the low spot.
I don't think that anybody has disagreed with raising the road and impacting the area.
Right. So
I didn't hear anyone disagree with that.
If we want to repave this, the town can repave it. Again, I'm going to highly recommend they don't do that. But if the town would like to spend another $5,000 or $6,000 and pave this area, they have the right to do that. I was looking at trying to save costs, trying to minimize the impact and impervious area that's needed along the ocean, trying to help the resources, trying to cut down on all the salt grit that runs off the road into the ocean. It'll get picked up in this grassed area and still allow the vehicles to navigate the corner safely and effectively. So that was the direction from that, knowing that we were going to impact this area, knowing that this entire area was going to be removed, knowing that we have to cut the pavement out of there and rebuild. It didn't make sense to me to put the pavement back. You always look at trying to make a safer intersection when you have destroyed the whole intersection to begin with.
Well, we do keep saying make it safer, but there is no proof that it's unsafe at all. The second thing I would like to point out is that we keep talking about sight lines, but they seem a little irrelevant to the conversation because we can go 1/8 of a mile in any direction in the state of Maine and have awful sight lines. I mean, we don't live on the California highway. And in fact, over by the bridge, where those sight lines are so dangerous, those sight lines are better than many other places in the town of South Thomaston. I mean, it just seemed...
We didn't change those. We maintained those. So according to design standards that the state and the federal government has adopted, a speed limit of 35 miles an hour with 1,000 vehicles per day.
Yes,
I have a stop and sight distance of 250 feet. That's to give the adequate time for reaction for a vehicle to press the brakes and stop the vehicle at that speed on a paved surface. So if you have less than those distances, then you create a situation where you can have conflict. So meaning the site distance that we targeted, the only site distance that we've targeted was around this ledge. Around this ledge to make sure that we had adequate site distance from this vehicle to this vehicle so that this vehicle could stop in time if he was in the middle of the road. If you didn't see him, or they pull out into this intersection and the car cannot stop if it's less than 250 feet. They will have an impact there.
Yes, I see that you've changed that since the last meeting.
Oh yeah, we significantly revised this entire intersection.
I see that. I can see that, but it still is just based on a red herring that the sight lines are. It doesn't matter. The last thing I want to say is first I want to ask, so the DOT is saying we have to change that fork in the road to a T. Is that what you're telling me?
Wait, you can do what you want.
Okay, so the last thing I would like to say is I was riding down Route 131 today, and I noticed that they have one of those traffic mirrors on a section of their road. And wouldn't that work just as well for us so that when you come to the stop sign at the fork, you can clearly see behind you what's coming down Island Road? Like, is it so much simpler and so much more affordable? I mean, it just seems such a over-designed fix for something that isn't really a problem and doesn't really fit the grant.
So you understand that we have to impact this area due to elevation alone, right?
Yes, you have to raise it up. Yes, I understand that. Yeah, I've heard nobody in this community be against trying to raise that road up a little bit.
So,
I have not heard anyone speak in favor of changing it to a T.
So I'm confused. So you'd like to see this paved and a mirror up here somewhere?
Yes, I would like to see the road remain a fork like it is and not spend all this money changing it to a T that doesn't really address the way we live.
My point is that if you hear me, it will cost more money to put the fork back as it currently is.
Why are we taking that?
It costs $5,000 to $6,000 more. I did the calculation before this because I knew this conversation was going to happen.
What do you mean? I don't understand what you mean.
To repave this area right here, it will cost additional pavement. You will put in about 85 right here. 85.
Well, won't you say?
Can I just interject here?
Yep.
Won't you save the money?
This discussion is not being fruitful, number one. But as I recall, one of the first pieces of feedback we got from the first public meeting was, while you're doing this, go take a look at the junction of Village Road and Island Road and make it safer. So, and I didn't dream that up. And the board didn't sit down one day and say, let's go do something with Island Road. We were reacting to stuff that we heard.
Okay, well, aren't you also hearing the opposite of that? Which you don't seem to be reacting to.
Who says?
Well, I'm looking at a redesign that looks almost identical to the first one when 90 people attended a meeting and said, we would like to see something much more minimal.
I've only lived in South Thomaston since 2007, but I can tell you that I've never been at a meeting that had 90 people,
Well, there were
including the one
50
you're
on
referring
Zoom.
to.
There were 50 on Zoom and 40 in the room. Isn't that 90?
Could Andrew finish his explanation of why it's going to cost more to keep it the way it is? Because that makes perfect sense to me. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, certainly.
You're going to have to fill and raise that whole area, basically.
That's it. So in this scenario we have here, we can determine how much fill we have to basically bring in. So we could limit the fill in the road elevation. So with this road going to 11.5, we can bring that 11.5 across this section here, and then we can taper it down. So meaning we can start the transition down to the ocean all the way up in this shoulder. If this is going to be paved and widened, then we need to maintain that fill elevation. For the most part, we can taper it somewhat, but we have to fill this entire area, that 1.75 foot there. And then in addition to that, we would want to pave that. So just looking at it quickly, I realized that there would be about 85 cubic yards of gravel. So there's about $4,000 worth of gravel alone that you'd have to bring and put along this section. and then you would have to repave it. Regardless of the scenario, this will be destroyed and removed. All that pavement from there, it's not like we're just going to be able to save the pavement. It'd be a different story then. We have to remove this no matter what to do all the road grading and work in this area. Even if we did not touch this intersection, this area would still be impacted and removed to adjust the grading for the road to make the transition occur. And when you do that, you either pay to return it to gravel, or you pay to put pavement back in here and keep that wide intersection. Safe or not, if you want to pay, or basically that's the argument or discussion, if you want to pay to put pavement back in this area after it's been removed and regraded, it's probably about that $4,000 to $6,000 range.
And Walter, we do, the program keeps track of who has their hand raised, and Chad Harris is next. However, Patrick Meller is the attorney who sent that letter. He also has his hand raised, and I believe he represents Mr. Harris. I just didn't know if you wanted to let Patrick go next.
No, I'd like to let Chad go next.
Great. Chad, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And you know what, I want to say something at the start of my little discussion here, and that is, it sounds like there's a decent amount of negativity going back and forth, and people are just sort of getting right to the point. But I know a whole bunch of us out there really appreciate you guys, having these conversations and having these meetings. And I think that there was a lot of great progress made in these plans. And Andrew, we appreciate that. Select board members, we appreciate you giving that direction to Andrew to go back and relook at these things. I mean, clearly you guys heard it. So, there's been a lot of frustration, certainly, but I kind of want to, thank everyone for all their time and input in getting the plans to where they are right now. But I think I sent you guys an email saying, the select board, and to Owen saying, I think there's some additional opportunities here. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, if we can go start at the portion by the pound. I have a sort of a real preliminary question about that. One of the things you did over by Village Road was you decreased the length pretty significantly of the area to be impacted, sort of the quote project. There seems to be a problem. I mean, there's certainly a significant problem from my standpoint, the standpoint of the folks on that have the potential wells impacted by the impacts of the ledge. Why can't this project shorten shorten the segment of road that is impacted back over to back closer to what you call the pond? Because there's a problem with the ledge, and I appreciate your statement that we potentially won't have to blast anymore. But even hydraulic hammers, I mean, we can listen to Alyssa Robinson, and I assume that the hydrologists and geologists and scientists will say that even hydraulic hammers are going to have potential impacts to well water and the aquifers, et cetera. But my question is, we have the issue with the wells and the ledge removal, and we also have the issue with the property rights of the pound to move that road up there. But why can't you just eliminate that portion of the project and sort of start it over by Point View, where the problem is? Because you're lowering it by the pound, which certainly isn't helping with the sea level rise. So I guess that's my preliminary question: is why can't you just start the project much more northerly than that?
It's the transition around the ledge and the radiuses as they come together. So we have, by pulling it in this section, we wanted to pull this out to improve the sight lines, pull it away from the ledge to open up so we can actually get around the ledge without having to impact it. And you can see here's the existing edge here. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility. I started the meeting by saying that we can change and alter this center line, and we might be able to pick up another foot or two in this location. But if we leave the road where it currently is, we're going to be about a foot from the edge of that ledge, period, trying to get around that section.
So, and that sort of, begs another question. So what? And I'm not trying to be facetious about it, but I mean, so what if it's closer to the ledge? I mean,
yeah, it doesn't meet any current safety standards or design guidelines. So it doesn't meet your 11-foot travel lanes. It doesn't meet your 4-foot wide shoulder. And the town could potentially be liable for impact if somebody does hit the ledge or has damage there. So what we've tried to do is open that angle up, improve the sight line, give the road some adjustment in that location while pulling away from the pound as well.
Okay, so I understand the answer. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I understand it. And then as far as the 4-foot shoulders go, I mean, is that what necessitates that? I understand that it's not necessarily a road stabilization issue. It's just
it's the speed of the road and the volume. So that's what's determined by AASHTO guidelines. They dictate the road width. Now those can be deviated as needed, but when you deviate from them, you put yourself in a liability for changing the design standards. In a road situation like this, with ledge and pond, you want the road as wide as you can with stable shoulders in case somebody ends up off that, to be able to secure and keep the vehicle from either running into a ledge or running over into the guardrail associated with the pond area. So that's where those standards come from. DOT follows those, but AASHTO has a design guidelines that it's a table that basically here's the number of vehicles per day, here's the volume of the speed, and this is what your minimum design standards are required to be.
okay. And so the minimum design standards require 4-foot shoulders on both sides.
Correct. Yes, 11-foot travel lanes and 4-foot shoulders.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. Part of the problem that I see with this also is that you have these intermittent pathways, and you call them shoulders or pathways, whatever you want to. You're talking about safety concerns about people being able to pull off, and sight lines and potentially pedestrians. But what you have here in real life is a situation where you've got these 4-foot pathways or shoulders on either side, and then it abruptly narrows down to 0.
No, there's existing shoulders down that road that are about the 4 feet.
No, there's not.
You can. This is a 4-foot shoulder in its current location as it stretches down. They dissipate and come back, but they're gravel or they're grass, or they've grown in over time. But in general standings, they try to maintain those. So the shoulder has dissipated, and there may be some sections that don't have it, but the shoulder doesn't disappear to 0. There's an existing 1.5-foot shoulder right here that has a slope across it, so you probably have a 2 or 3-foot shoulder there.
All right, look, I mean, I live there. I walk it. I see it. I went out there and eyeballed it for a long time, and maybe it's just overgrown. But I'm telling you right now, in that current condition, there's maybe 6 inches of some place that you can walk, right on on either side of it, and that scares me, because you're going to get people that are if they're walking out there, they're going to be lulled into a false sense of security. Maybe not paying attention, maybe not understanding that these things are intermittent, and all of a sudden they're going to end up right in the middle of the road. And the trucks that are driving out there aren't going to understand whether people are on a pathway or they're not on a pathway. And it's creating a new situation out there that's not there now, that I find that may well be chaotic and dangerous.
Right. I look at it as we're trying to take the scenario that the area that the city or the town's working in, and you try to improve that to the greatest extent. To extend the sidewalks down, we try to transition and taper them into where the town project stops. It's very customary for towns to work that way. They take the section that is being improved, being rebuilt for one reason or another, and you put in the proper shoulders, you put in the proper road width, and then you taper it down to tie into existing scenarios. Otherwise, you'd never start any project, because you have to start and stop somewhere in there.
You have to start and stop. There's a lot of articles nationwide about sidewalks to nowhere, and the potential dangers that they pose. And I would agree with you if the plan is to ultimately improve all of Island Road and have 4-foot pathways on both sides, all down.
Again, don't be mistaken. This is a shoulder. I know we've talked about pedestrians walking down this and having access to it, but this is a straight up road shoulder. If the pedestrian wants to walk down that, they can. We're not creating a pathway, and we're not creating a walkway. We're not putting signs up that say, please push your strollers around this shoulder here. It's a 35-mile-an-hour road that will have sufficient shoulders for people to traverse on if they choose to, but we're not going to delineate and identify them as walkways. That was one of the cases that it was discussed back in the early stages, how nice it would be to start picking up a walkway and access around that. But clearly at the last meeting, of 80 to 90, however many people are truly there. We've sort of backed off that, but what we have tried to do is make sure that we have a wide enough shoulder to accommodate a vehicle if needed, and to improve sight lines, and then to allow somebody to safely get around the ledge and safely get down the shoreline in these locations if they choose to walk on the shoulder.
No, and I appreciate that, Andrew. It's, whatever we call it, we can call it a pathway or a walkway or a shoulder. It's semantics. The practical reality of it is that we all know, there's 100% chance that people are going to be walking on those shoulders. And I just think it poses a danger. My biggest issue with that, the reason it becomes relevant to my question, is if we could narrow those down, maybe to 2 feet, for instance, or have it on one side of the road, we could probably, it looks like we could either get completely away from dealing with property rights in the pound and or getting it completely off that getting the project completely off that ledge, because I think the goal should certainly be keeping all impacts off that ledge. And I heard someone ask, I can't remember who it was, asking you, Andrew, did I hear you say there's going to be no more blasting? And I understand you kind of hedged around the answer, saying probably not. But even the impacts of very large hydraulic hammers attached to very large excavators is going to pound the stuff out of that ledge, just like blasting will. I don't want anybody to be lulled into a false sense of security that hydraulic hammers are not going to do just as much damage as low impact blasting. So, in any event, that right now that's the extent of my questions about this section of the road. I'll hold off on my comments on the south section. I wanted to let you know Patrick Malore is an attorney. He doesn't represent me. He represents a larger group of us out there. So, and the same thing with Lissa Robinson. I know the letter's addressed to me. I'm not trying to absolve myself of any liability or any responsibility for it. I'm just letting you know it's a much larger group, and we just had to have representatives that those letters are going to go to or come from. So happy to let Patrick speak.
I'm happy to speak.
Actually, and I apologize for interrupting, but
no problem.
The next individual that had their hand raised was Randall Chandler. Randall, if you want to let Patrick go first,
Well, it's Andrew Stansioff, I think, but go ahead, Andrew.
All right, so then
I think I'll control the recognition. I think.
Perfect. Thank you.
I can see them all. Yep. So Andrew or Randy, whichever is there, I think it's Andrew. You are next.
All right, it's Andrew, and I finally unmuted myself, and of course I would love to hear from the lawyer, and I hope we do hear from him. I have a couple of comments or questions initially. A couple of them are based on what was said tonight. Owen mentioned that he had checked with 5 engineering firms or engineers, and they all said the road had to be turned into a T because it was dangerous. That's the first comment. The second one is that Andrew, the engineer, said that the road doesn't meet standards. And I don't know what standards they are. And I would like to know what standards they are. And so I'd like to get copies of the standards that we're supposed to be following. The third comment has to do with this whole problem of COVID that has really put a crimp on our activities and our ability to inform each other of our feelings and our knowledge. And so what has happened is that we have had very little chance. Sometimes our chances were dimmed or eliminated by events. The room was too full. well, I just happened to have had a heart attack, so I couldn't follow it. So that was a bit of a problem. But for me, the problem is that under normal circumstances, we would be able to come down to the offices and say, hey, what about this? I talked to these people and here are my thoughts. And I just don't feel that a lot of our thinking, a lot of our ideas have filtered into this process. And I would like to know where we go from here on that and whether we can find a better way. The next comment is very simply that long ago, I asked Owen why we couldn't fill part of the pond at the pound. And I was told, oh no, the state would not allow that. Well, that pound or pond or whatever it is not a natural pond anymore. It's dammed at one end. And if you want to line of sight, improve the line of sight, you should consider that possibility. And the other, or just at least part of the pond should be filled. The other thing is that no matter what you do with plastic material to supposedly keep the water from undermining the road, you'll always have that problem because there is no material that will face the ravages of the sea. My suggestion is that you turn, yes, I can see the wonderful engineering drawings that will tell us how we're going to fix this. I feel that we should, if we can go back to the drawing, to the road, yeah, I think we should consider moving that bend right there toward the pond and thus eliminating the line of sight problem, thus eliminating the ledge problem. And I would suggest that on the other side of the road, where there is now kind of a marsh of Phragmites, that's going to continue undermining the road unless something is done there. And I don't see anybody suggesting anything. The sea will not only come in from the northeast, but it will also come in from the south, from the southeast. So those are my initial comments. I feel strongly also that the village road area need not be changed. That we could build walls to keep the sea out, but certainly we don't need to have a weird new construction there that will impede traffic and probably cause more accidents. I know of no accidents. I've been here 14 years. I have not seen one single accident there. And if there were somebody should have mentioned those in their reporting. So, and the other thing is we don't have any traffic counts. It would be nice to have that. So one of the problems with COVID is that we've been limited in our exchange of information. And I don't want to blame anybody in particular, but I think we're all a part of the community and we should all try and resolve the problem by being a little more cooperative in exchanging the information. We're getting to the point where everybody's getting a little bit angry, and it would be a good idea if we went back to being a little more coherent and
inclusive
and correct. Thank you very much.
And real quick, I'm sorry for interrupting, but Walter, just a reminder to all the participants, if you're standing in front of your computer and raising your hand like this with the screen share, it's hard to see everyone. Please select the raise your hand button so that we can kind of put you in the question queue.
Thank you. So Patrick, you're next.
Can I respond to any of that, or we just want to listen to them?
I'd like to hear Andrew's response.
Yeah, I understand. I just
Oh, I'm
wanted
sorry,
to,
Andrew.
yeah, I just wanted to address the pond here. So this is truly a natural resource. Whether it was man-made or not, now it's part of the ocean. So the permitting agencies are not going to let you fill that in to relocate your road in that direction. And I would highly anticipate that if you told the grant writer that you were going to fill in the ocean to raise your road, they would have some concerns there as well. So we can't do that. We can't fill that in. But in part of all of our designs, it's stabilizing both the roads. I'm fully aware that this elevation here is the same as this elevation, is the same as this elevation. So kind of approaching this as a whole and figuring out how to stabilize everything is definitely on the list. At one point, our old drawings, we showed stabilization running down both edges, but it was a little messy on the plan, so we've taken that off for this time being. But I understand. I hear what you're saying. If you want to go to the DOT website and look at entrance permits and look at road standards, there's plenty of information on there. I'm all directing to roadway widths, roadway intersections. Primarily that one that says they want a road to intersect one of their roads at 90 degrees, and they're willing to accept up to a 45, or even they prefer 60, but you can get waivers for a 45-degree entrance for those intersections. For the road counts as well, DOT has a wonderful website as well that's called Map Viewer. You can go to that, and it actually shows the section of the road, shows where you are, and you can click on the section of the road, and it generates all that wonderful information. It generates the speed, it generates the hourly capacity. It goes through all these things. The average annual daily traffic right here. This is what a lot of it's designed on. Counts the trips. So all this stuff's readily available right on the main DOT as far as the guidelines. And as engineers, we have to rely on DOT, our local DOT, and the local ordinance to design these roads. Anytime we go and deviate from that, it increases our liability for what we've done. So that's basically what we did. So we pulled off these roads and we designed it per DOT for those roads. We're not designing it for a highway. We're designing it for an in-town or a 35-mile-an-hour road with 1,000 vehicles per day. That's where we based our guidelines, and it changes. If this was a major highway or the speed limit went up, those design standards increase. You're going to get 12-foot lanes and 5-foot shoulders, and it goes up from there. So we did look at all those standards when we did design them.
Thank you, Andrew. Patrick?
Thank you, Walter. Yeah, I'm Patrick Meller. And Walter, will you give me a nod if you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. I apologize for my late arrival and my difficulty with Zoom. But quickly, by way of background, in the late 80s and early 90s, I traversed this road, 20, 30, 40 times a year. I did a lot of work for Bob and Carmen Baines. I'd grab something at the off-island store, sandwich, and then I'd go over to McLuhan's and sit in the parking lot. And my stepfather roofed the Sprucehead Co-op, blah, blah, blah. Lots of, I'm familiar with the territory. I want to echo what Chad Harris said, which we appreciate the work that's been done to date by Andrew and by the board and by Owen. And, we hope to continue to be able to cooperate and communicate with the board and with Owen and with Andrew, and using, downloading the information you're providing us, discussing with our engineer and giving ideas and hopefully having some back and forth. Andrew, I have one question about the hammer on the end of the excavator, because I don't know much about. What's your take on the relative danger, or not danger, or risk, I suppose is a better word, risk to the wells using the hammer on the end of the excavator? If you don't mind me asking that question, please.
The hammer is a hydraulic hammer that affixes to the end of the excavator. They come in multiple different sizes. The The danger of that is it vibrates the ground, and it's associated with that bedrock there. So you have your bedrock, you have your well that's 150 feet away. It could indeed be vibrating the same piece of rock that well has found clean water. But none of the hammering, I know that there's been a big point that we're going to hammer the side of that mountain off. As I started to say, there may be no ledge removal associated. So we're hoping we can avoid it altogether. But what I am saying is there may be pieces of ledge that need to be hammered to remove that. I mean, I mentioned it when we talked about blasting. The blasters would look at that, assess the situation, and make a determination if they can blast that area. The same would be true for the hammering. We're not talking about pounding into the ground, 30 feet or something like that. We're talking about taking some pieces off along the edge. Ideally, we would leave that as natural as it currently is because it's weathered, it has the moss on it, it looks natural in its current situation, and we avoid that altogether entirely. And we could do that if we want to keep pushing the road a little bit further, but I try to keep a balance here, and I try to make you aware that there may be some subtle adjustments along the edge of that ledge. And we're literally talking about, as long as the ledge cooperates, you're talking about, a matter of an hour or so of hammer away just a few of the pieces, trying to smooth some of these corners out like this corner and down here. I don't anticipate that we're going to come into the face of that and try to shave 6 feet deep across the face of that. We're talking about knocking off a little knob that's 6 inches at 12 inches high just to smooth things over so we can grade and get some aggregate underneath it. The only reason I wiggled around the blasting component is simply due to the fact that we don't know what's underneath that road. We are going up, so there's a really good chance that we're not going to have to do any blasting in the ground here, and we would certainly avoid blasting due to the concerns of the well that have been expressed, and knowing that it's a sensitive area. We fully understand and respect the fact that it's an island. You're on a little island. You have that one place for that well right now. I'm sure it was specifically located there for a reason. So we want to preserve that and stay away from that to the best of our abilities. So that's what we are proposing. We're proposing to minimize any of the blasting, any of the ledge removal, and if we run into a scenario where they have to be deployed or implemented, we'll take all precautions to make sure it's done properly. But as of now, right here, if this road situation goes where people can approve or look at what we've tried to do here, is we have removed that road or moved that road 10 feet from the face of that with the hope to leave that alone entirely.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, and it has to do with the width, I suppose, the width of the shoulder, as it were, because right now, I think we're in agreement that the road doesn't comply with the standards that the state has. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay, so is it because because the road is being improved that you have to then make it compliant with all of the rules and standards, or
there's
just that you
no have to? This is a town road. Okay, I think I've said this a couple of times. There's no have to, but we as engineers make the recommendation. You should follow state standards to the best of your ability in the locations that you can. With regards to this ledge and the shoulder, I'm driving 35 miles an hour, 2.5 feet from the face of that ledge. To me, seems dangerous. Hopefully, to a lot of you. So the goal was to pull this road off away from the ledge and create a nice 4-foot shoulder in there, so that if you happen to actually leave the asphalt, you're not going to smash a cream into that ledge as your vehicle drops down into the dirt or no shoulder. So we've intended to put a 4-foot wide shoulder through that area to give the clearance, especially we're all from Maine, or a lot of us are. There's snow removal, all that happens and piles up on the edge of the roads. And with that shoulder, it helps keep it all back. So snow from the face of this ledge within 2.5 feet is less than ideal. So picking up 4 or 5 extra feet in those locations seems to be pretty ideal.
And this might not be a very intelligent question, but would a guardrail at the edge of would that make sense or not?
Absolutely. Yeah, you could run a guardrail, and that happens in those scenarios. If the town would like to pull this road closer and stretch a guardrail, basically you probably want to start one down here and you transition it all the way up to this face and then pull the road back to the face of the ledge, that's entirely possible. But be aware, if we have ledge in that location, we're going to be down there hammering and trying to set a guardrail post as well. And we're going to have to hammer it into there. Guardrail is about $35 to $40 a linear foot. And if you have to socket each one of those posts, you can get into a few $100s per post just to socket it or get it into the ledge. So you could run into thousands of dollars pretty quickly.
All right. Thank you, and I'm on standby if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay, Kevin Gordon, you're next.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. So
yes, you are.
Thank you for obviously pulling together this meeting. So thank you, board members. Thank you, Owen. I wanted to echo, I guess, a couple of things. I mean, since I am a budding property owner, and I really do appreciate, Andrew, your redesign. I think the thing that I'm still very concerned about, obviously, is even with the hydraulic hammer. I really have a lot of trepidation about the damage to wells, including my neighbor Jim McDonald, whose well is the closest to the work. I know you're kind of hedging your bets, Andrew, and saying you're not really sure until we get further along. I guess I'm trying to, I'd be more comfortable if I saw a design that didn't have, any impact to the ledge whatsoever. I think all of our biggest concerns, because if you look at and you read the GEI report that I'm sure you gentlemen will once you've had time to digest it, most of the wells on this peninsula are within 1,000 feet or so of this area. And that's what all of us are the most fearful of, regarding this. So while I really applaud you, Andrew, in terms of the redesign here, I guess we're just looking for, anything else that could be done to try to pull it back from that ledge. There's no hydraulic hammer, no blasting to prevent vibrations.
The design that currently shows doesn't involve ledge removal. We've highlighted that area as potential. So again, we've pulled 10 feet off the face of that, trying to achieve that. It's difficult. We haven't finished the grading. We haven't done the cross sections. We haven't looked at how we're going to, my primary concern is honestly drainage, how we're going to convey and pull water out of that location. That's why there's a red band where some of this occurs. When you put drainage in, we have to cut into that face there, trying to get some pipe or something to convey the water through that section. It's tough to determine if we'll need to kind of knock off a little portion of that ledge, but in a perfect scenario here, we will not involve any ledge removal due to the concerns. I mean, the town is very concerned. The board expressed their concern about this.
Yeah.
And that was the direction they gave us, is make sure we get out of that ledge so we can avoid it. They don't want to impact the well.
Right. No, and I fully appreciate that. I think we all appreciate that. Like I said, that is our biggest concern. So the other thing I wanted to mention, and Chad brought it up earlier regarding the shoulders, and Patrick even continued with some questions on that. I can tell you, as someone who's walked Island Road many, many times this past year, there may be shoulders there, Andrew, but they're overgrown.
Well,
right?
That's it.
So
it's the sand and the salt that the town's put on. They build up, they create a little hump, and the only way you get a shoulder back is if you grade off the edge and flatten it back out again. So it's not a traversable shoulder in a lot of those locations.
No, it is not.
The space is there for it, and they could be rehabbed in a lot of those locations, I'm sure, but you're not going to go walking down those shoulders. I understand what you're saying.
Right. I think we just don't want to give people the false sense of security that these shoulders are going to be, a path, a walkway, as you said earlier. So we were concerned that people were thinking that they could walk down this and then all of a sudden, boom, the shoulder ends and you're back right out in the road. I think that's what Chad was referring to in terms of a sidewalk to nowhere. And I guess, if I understood you correctly, Andrew, it's the state recommendation that you have the 4-foot shoulder, but it's really a town decision in terms of whether that could be reduced to 3 feet or 2.5 or what have you. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And again, if I would entertain the shoulder being reduced on this side, but again, I think we want to pick up as much space as we can, for one, to avoid the ledge concerns we talked about, and for two, to give as much clearance away from that deadly fixed object that's in that roadway right now.
Okay.
So I think if we're talking about shoulder adjustments, I would look along this edge, because that's where we're going to have a guardrail for protection anyways. I mean, it would buy us some more room to develop and to rip wrap and stabilize along the other section.
And just so I'm clear, Andrew, on your new plans, I assume that there is still, and correct me if I'm wrong, but again, I'm not an engineer. There still is the U onto Point View and to go off Point View, correct?
There is. So we still have the U driveway. We propose to improve this one. We haven't made it this far. We wanted to talk to everybody if they wanted to maintain this U. Ideally, we'd remove it. I think it's unsafe. You can't really see. I can show you the graphic, but if nobody has an issue with that, it's your driveway that currently exists. We would bring that up to grade similar to this one and tie it in.
And again, what I would tell you is that, and I think you can talk to Jim McDonald and Gene Goodman, who've obviously owned their properties longer than I have, but I have actually seen folks from the Lobster Pound. It's trucks that actually turn around and use that U.
Right.
I and that is that property, obviously, that is owned by the Athenas, I believe. I have no objection to the U staying there. I mean, I think the trucks have obviously used it. I think the three of us who have properties on Point View use it as well. I don't turn into there, but I may exit from there.
Gotcha.
Right.
Well, if that's the desire to maintain it, I think we could easily incorporate that.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Travis, you're up.
Am I on?
You are.
Okay. So I'm obviously concerned, and I sent Owen some pictures of our working area that we have at the dock down there. We've been, all of our boats taking up traps for the last few days, and we have very limited space because we cannot just back a trailer out and load them directly from the boat. We have to put all our traps on pallets and bring them out in front of the building and then take them home. So it causes for, more handiwork, I guess, than the other areas that we have. And this picture that Owen's showing right now is my truck beside a stack of traps. The blocks represent what I roughly could do with a tape measure to get to the road shoulder, the proposed road shoulder. And, you're seriously going to inhibit what we can do down there. And we all need to be able to access that area, get our traps out of there, and get home. And we can't, be down there all night long and asking the workers also to stay there all night long to get us our traps on our trailers, plus load their lobsters onto their truck and go home. So putting that roadway closer to that building is going to seriously inhibit what was going on. And earlier I did not understand how much the road was going to be just maintained at the level it actually was. I thought it was going to be raised another 2 feet, but apparently it's just going to be staying at the same grade level as where it's actually at. So every time that road has been paved in the past, they've put like 2 to 4 inches of tire on there. So that's what has caused the big road buildup and the taper area that is kind of, gives us the trouble of getting in and out of there. So I don't know. I think we need to maintain the same road path that the road already has. And I don't know. I guess you can't fill in the pound area. Maybe lowering the speed limit in that area might help. Doesn't mean it's going to slow the people down, but it might help make the whole parameters of all these programs work. And as far as the U area, when we exit that building, we do need to go out there and use that U area to pull back in and to get headed back north.
Okay.
So turning that into one singular driveway would be a serious deterrent also.
Yeah, so just sort of, so backing up, I understand all those comments you've made. I read those, Owen shared those, forwarded those emails along to me this afternoon, just before the meeting. But looking at this, so if that's where the shoulder is based on your rough measurements,
No, that's not the shoulder. That is the edge of your proposed roadway. The
Okay.
shoulder would extend 4 feet towards the building.
Yeah, so it doesn't go entirely 4 feet towards the building. So I think you're off slightly, but regardless, it's semantics. Right here on this end here, we're talking about a 4 to 5 foot. Yep. So we're 5 feet on this far end. But then going back to line up with your building, we do that. We're talking about 3, 4.5, somewhere in that range. So it does extend towards that. The shoulder will be paved, but the hope is by lowering this. I've got the grade shown here, is by carving this road down to eliminate that asphalt that's been built up. It would help make that transition smoother and potentially convince you to say, look, if we lower this road, lower this grade in through here, your transition into your lot will be that much better, while the town can basically benefit from pulling off the ledge and not have to remove the ledge, because there's unfortunately there's no way to get through this section with a smooth transition. We'd have to go through the edge of the ledge, or we have to get into that parking area a little bit, and hopefully there could be some reconfiguration, maybe a trap or two put on the other side. But your parking rate, based on where your truck is in that picture, share it here. You're parking somewhere way up off the pavement anyways. You're sitting right here in the shoulder of the road, essentially. Is where
No, I took measurements from the building with a tape measure, and those blocks are at the edge of your roadway. That
No,
23 and 25 foot that is those measurements.
Oh, I believe that, absolutely. I'm just referencing where your truck is and where the traps are. They're right here is where those are.
Yes, you're correct.
They're
But
off
I
the
mean,
pavement, they're up past that section.
But you've
they're
given
up in that area.
But you've given no measurement for me to take from that
Yeah,
telephone.
no, I got you. I think, looking at this before the meeting, I was looking at potentially tightening up this radius, and I think there's a good possibility if we extend this radius to say 350 or something like that. I think we kind of do like a compromise here. We lose like 1.5 feet in this section, and we pick it up on that other side, and I think hopefully a compromise of that, with the road adjustment, will get you back to having a usable area. We wouldn't have to take much from that. We'd still be outside the rock portion, so we'd still need to deal with the landowners there. But I think we can make a decent balance, and going back to all the other comments and trying to minimize how far back we actually have to stretch these improvements.
I'd also like to say that currently the Athenas family does not run that lobster facility. It is being leased. So I don't know, how any kickbacks, paybacks, or anything from the town from taking that land is going to affect the current, owner of the business, I guess I'll say, not the owner of the facility.
Right.
But it's seriously going to inhibit what we've got going on there. I mean, we need to be able to pull that far ahead. And those, there was a lobster truck at the main door when I took that picture. So to do the whole shuffle, it makes it really, really tight. That's the lobster truck before he backed into the door. And then the later on one is my truck waiting.
Right.
To get in to get the traps. And so we have to, we need that space. The reason we don't want parking on that side of the road is because that is a working area for us to pick up traps and move out of there. That's why parking is across the road.
Right. No, I understand that, hear that, sympathize with that, and we can try to see what we can do to balance that. If we make that a little bit flatter and you get a little bit of that slope back, hopefully we can work on a compromise to kind of split the difference. And we're talking of a couple of feet there if we can get around the ledge without having to hammer it or using an explosive, that would be an ideal scenario, hopefully, that everybody could come to terms on.
Jim McDonald, you had your hand up for a long time. Did you get tired, or do you still want to speak? You're muted. Jim, you have to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Andrew, I just want to say, you've done a real good job of putting everything together there. But I do have one item that I thought might need correcting. I have 100-foot tape, and my well head is 86 feet from the asphalt in the road. If you're going to work on that nut that comes out, then I'm probably within 79 feet of where you're going to be taking a whack at it. My well is 69 feet deep. I purchased the property in 1969. I have never had one problem with water. I have done surveys with A&L Lab. In fact, I did one on 21 August of this year with no issues. So you can understand that I'm not in favor of blasting nor pneumatic rock and concrete demolition, jackhammers, whatever you want to call it. So I just want to put that out there for the record. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Oh, we have a new entry. Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah. So I live on Silk Cove Road. I just wanted to say the same thing that Jim McDonald just said. I'm very nervous about my well and my neighbor's wells, and I don't know much about engineering, but just the thought of blasting or hammering or whatever you're doing to that ledge makes me very nervous. I also have had my well tested within the last month and sent the results to A&L Lab, and it came back just fine. So I'm just watching what you all are going to do. And I'm very concerned about considering touching that ledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw something out there about the rock ledge. Having recently had some stonework done at my house, they were able to use a saw and cut some pretty significant size stone. Is that even from an engineering standpoint, Andrew? Is that even you're talking about so little of that ledge now? Could we literally cut that without jackhammers or blasting or anything? Just cut it with a pneumatic saw?
Yes, is the answer. The wells are the number one concern for everybody out there. It's detrimental, the potential to be detrimental to all the landowners. So we're very aware, very cautious. And number one is we avoid ledge entirely. But yes, we have, and I have required and requested ledge removal done by saws before in the past. And you can take off little pieces of them. They don't go very deep. You essentially use the big asphalt saw that they use, but you can cut down little pieces and knobs and edges. If we're just taking little chunks like that off, ultimately we're just going to avoid ledge removal entirely. Hopefully we can do just that. Again, it's really this little knob here is the one that I see as the potential. But if we look real close at this, this is elevation 11. This is elevation 12. So our road's going to be at elevation 12. So we can continue to play with this to potentially raise that up a little bit and still have the ability to get water out and from behind there. We hate to create pockets here because it'll degrade your road that you just spent all that money. So we're still looking at that. But yes, if we run into little tiny sections, we can use saws to pull it off, or smaller even. I've seen them have to do it with like a little handheld hammer jack before, to pull a little pocket of ledge out because they were right next to something they didn't want to disturb. So it is possible. Rock removal is, and a lot of times you can actually get an excavator I shouldn't say a lot of times. Ledge in Maine is completely unpredictable. You don't know how hard it is. But you can get an excavator on those and start pulling on some of the cracks and fissures in it and break off large pieces without having to do any hammering. So I caveat, ledge removal may be required. I know I'm not giving you everything I want, everything you want, if you will, but I just want to make you aware that some of this will potentially disappear, but we're going to try to avoid it if we can.
Okay, I'm looking to see if there's a first timer before I go to some repeats.
And actually, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, I am hearing a lot about the discussion around how the ledge is removed, but not necessarily what the aesthetic end result of that would be. And maybe not for tonight, because there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, but the group does have legal representation. I would be curious to find out if there were avenues for ledge removal, especially considering the importance of trying to keep the parking area free in front of the facility and giving as much space there. If options of, some amount of ledge removal, but by different means that are going to be less impactful, if the aesthetic appearance of that, once it's all done, would be offensive to folks, or if that's something that we could explore in greater detail.
Okay, I'm having trouble visualizing what you're saying, but yeah, future discussion item. John, we're not going to quite end where we began because Chad's in the queue as well.
I see Julia's hands up.
Yeah, Julia had her hand up for quite a while.
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
No, I don't know that she did the click. She just had her hand up physically.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Julia.
I'm struck listening to the conversation tonight. The roadway changes have come a long way, and I think we've all concurred with that and are appreciative of it. The devil remains in the details. And one of the things, Andrew, that I heard you say was that you were talking about 11-foot lanes. And that surprises me because I would think we could do 10-foot lanes here perfectly well. You have to leave some amount of space on the pavement for your center lines and some for your fog lines. But the more you can squeeze this a little bit, it seems to me we're better served. As I went out and pasted off, and I confess that that's a very crude way to do it, it looked to me as if we had 10-foot lanes for an awful lot of Island Road. And the one exception was the bridge. I was hoping that I could convince somebody to think about restriping the bridge and bringing it back down to 10 feet so that you have some consistency along the roadway in terms of the travel lanes. Right now, they change markedly. And if you look at where the people who do those donuts or whatever you call them when you accelerate your car very quickly and take half the tread off the tires, when you look at where that happens, it happens on the slightly wider sections of the roadway. So I would argue, as you get onto the island, the road's quite narrow, that as you come down onto the bridge, if you're coming towards the village, restriping the bridge and making it a consistent lane width, and I would argue for 10 feet very strongly, assuming that the center line takes up whatever, 9 inches, and the fog lines take up another foot or so together, that you get a consistent pattern through there. I'm also curious as to what the elevation of the top of the pavement on the bridge is. Do you have a sense of that?
Don't have it on this plan.
I know.
I don't have my AutoCAD open, but I believe it's somewhere in like the range of, actually, I have Google open right here. If we can get an elevation, that's somewhere in the range of like 12, 13.
I was just curious.
And then it drops down to the 9 in front of us. The elevation's right down here in the corner if you run over what we have on. So you're sitting at 12, 13, 14. It's somewhere, it's a few feet higher than the road section that we're coming into there.
Okay. But if you can keep your pavement, you showed the pavement at 22 feet. I assume that wasn't two 11-foot lanes, but rather that was the total width of pavement. So in my head, I was deducting for the fog lines and the center line.
Yeah, so that 22 feet wide is the full pavement width. The lane width is the required asphalt width that you can have, but some great calming methods, as you've alluded to, is to paint the lane narrower to give you the illusion of a narrower lane to help people slow down. So currently, through this section, there's an existing measurement on the current width. It's almost 22 feet. There's one down here that's 21 and a half. But ultimately, yeah, that's a great idea. You can paint the lanes a different width, and I do that very often, trying to pick up some paved shoulder width and to give you that narrowing feel, even though you still have the safety of the pavement if you happen to go off. But absolutely, we could paint a 10-foot lane down the edge of that road, and I think that's probably where you'd end up, just like you alluded to. By the time you get your width of your center line and your width of your fog line all painted, you're going to be taking up most of that length anyways. And DOT allows you to deviate from that road width as long as you have the safety of the travel lane, especially in a town scenario like this.
Yeah, I would argue strongly for it being a 10-foot travel lane on either side. 11-foot makes me pretty unhappy. The 4-foot shoulder, it also seems to me you could gain yourself a couple of feet by going down to something less than 4, a little bit on either side. I think the more that you can trim your dimensions, the happier everybody will be. I'm also frustrated, I've got to confess, that I've asked several times for cross sections and never had an answer as to why we're unable to have them, because it would contribute so significantly to our ability to understand what's going on.
I've seen that request and I've heard that. So during our design process, generally speaking, to generate cross sections, like true cross sections, which will show the road, basically a section through the road at intervals of 25, 50 feet, whatever we elect to do. That's the last step of a design process. So we don't use them for design. We don't use them for anything else. The only thing that the cross sections are used for is for a contractor to build the road. And I'll be honest, 90% of the time, the contractors don't use the cross sections. They use the plans anyways, and they kind of look at them if they have any questions, especially in a road like this. They wouldn't be super useful. So to do this road, our next step, once we get an alignment basically roughed out, where we think we want it with some flexibility, is to put grading on this. And we do everything in 3D. So all of our proposed grading will be at a true elevation. We'll have a true contour across here, and we'll have it'll match into where the existing contours are. And then we generate contours, we generate cross sections. Once everything's done, the alignment's done, the vertical alignment's done, we have all the elevations nailed down, then we generate those cross sections. But we do it all by hand or do it by grading in a 3D model rather than generate a cross section by hand or by just picking a spot to generate one or two of them.
But for community consumption and for people to understand what is actually being suggested, a couple of diagrammatic cross sections that indicated it took 2 or 3 significant points. One at Village Road, so that people understand what that really is going to be like, and one up by the Lobster Pound, one perhaps by the ledge, that nose of the ledge, would be extremely helpful, because you're trying to sneak in both the paved surface, some sort of shoulder, some sort of drainage, because you have sort of vestigial drainage ditches all along there. There's the little piece of grass in front of the Lobster Company's parking lot on the residential side or the inland side. There's a culvert under Jim McDonald's and Kevin's driveway there at Point View. There are a couple of other places where, as I poked around, I could sort of find drainage, and all of it's badly overgrown, badly deteriorated. So what sort of dimensions are you looking for that? But, you know, the spread of this is hard to visualize, given and hard to believe in some instances, given the drawings that we have in front of us. The difficulty is that it's useful to see something illustrative on this early before you get into 50% design development, because it gets harder and harder to change things. And so if we're really looking for some thoughtful community input, and for abutters and others to understand exactly what's happening, or the import of what the riprap slope looks like on a plan, it's really useful to have that sort of information. So I would reiterate the fact that I'm not looking for sections out of construction drawings, but I would think that we could all benefit from one or two cross sections that would let people understand the extent of construction work. I'm also, just because I'm ranting on, but there's also a place near where that ledge nose is that seems to have had a lot of cement poured into it at one point. And it's underneath the asphalt, but it's where the asphalt's breaking up. And I have no idea what that is. It looks just as though somebody dumped concrete in it at one point. And well, except it looked as if it was poured in under the asphalt. So that leads me to a question. Have you done any simple borings because you also alluded to the fact that you were concerned about a ledge underneath the asphalt. I would think maybe a boring or two in that area, just a very short boring, a core essentially, would help to understand whether you can tell us with a straight face that there won't be any blasting because you're not going to run into a ledge problem.
Right, so there's a couple of things there. So the cross section, again, it's I'm not sure how much a cross section would benefit the average town individual that's looking at a road. Quite honestly, when we put a plan together in this scenario, generally speaking, what the ditch slope is, what the side slope is, how the culvert's going to be, how much cover is going to be over the culvert. Those are general engineering design standards that we go through in painstaking detail, if you will, to make sure that it all fits. Whether that ditch is in this location or in this location, ultimately it's a pretty minimal adjustment. So to get to that point where we can show you where the grading is and where all the things are lined out is quite an undertaking, quite honestly. I mean, it's a few days worth of work to sit there and kind of draw through it. It doesn't sound like a lot, so it's a few days worth of work, but when we have to do it once and then we change something significantly and we do it again and again and again, it starts adding up. So we generally go down this process. We show you where the road is. We show you about the elevation. See, I don't need those to generate the plan here because I can measure off this and I offset these lines and I know that I'm going to need a 3-to-1 side slope or a 2-to-1 side slope. so I can take this edge of shoulder and offset it 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, and then know where I'm going to be and what contour I'm going to tie back into. But we do that at the next level once we kind of nail down where this road is. Ideally, we're going to stay within this prescribed right-of-way to the best of our ability. I know down in this area, you can see we're getting close. There's going to be some impact, especially if we're talking about raising this a foot. So your fill slope's going to come into this wetland. It's going to be out along the edge here. But generally speaking, we don't get into that at the kind of down at this level of design and planning process.
I understand that, but here, to go back to the devil in the details phrase, here, I do think that the average town person in South Thomaston could benefit from at least an illustrative cross-section that lets them know how far out in the wetland the riprap goes and similar things.
Yeah, there's no such thing. So the illustrative cross-section, it has to be a real one for it to be usable. So we can guess and we can tell you, okay, it's going to be.
Let's ask it another way. For example, are you doing full depth reconstruction?
Yes.
And so there is no way for me to know that looking at the plans.
Well, it's a preliminary plan, and back in 2019, if you look at our cost estimate, got it here somewhere. It calls it right out in that. So
in truth, I haven't seen your cost estimate. So
yeah, we haven't issued the next round of plans, and again, we're trying to kind of get through the process here until we're ready to go to the next phase and try to get things aligned a little bit better for this project. So when we get into the cross sections of a plan, so here's a cross section of the plan that we end up detailing and creating, and it shows the existing grade, it shows the center line elevation, it shows the back slope, it shows the location of where everything ties into. But again, looking at that, without getting into that, again, like I said, the contractors generally don't even get into these things. So to go into a plan set that we generally issue, you'll have your profiles, it'll show where things are, show the road section, show where all the pavement markings are. So we'll be able to see exactly how it all goes together. And then you get into your typical details that this is primarily what they're going to look at for all those things, the road sections, the gravel sections. So you're going to get all this. It's just not at this point in time. We'll definitely get through the detail. You can definitely help us kind of go through that as we get into things a little bit closer. But in the preliminary process, to bring it from the stage we're in now into this final stage here, it's a complex process. It's timely. And I would hate to just kind of throw some stuff out there and say, yeah, we're going to be about right here, because this to me does the same thing. I'm telling you that we're going to be raising that road about 1.5 feet. And regardless of the side slope of the road and the shoulder of the road and the ditch of the road, we'll get there. We're going to tie it in, and we're going to use engineering standards to do just that.
Well, it's the last part of your phrase that is the difficult part, because you've used the phrase guidelines as well.
Yes.
And the introduction to the AASHTO standards says these are guidelines. And you're allowed to use your best engineering judgment to modify those guidelines to adapt in a creative way to unusual circumstances. And that's what you've begun to do. And that's being greeted by us with appreciation.
Yeah,
I think that the difficulty, let me use an example. Once upon a time, I was involved in a project where there was a great deal of interest in having things look in a very particular way. And we went over the specs several times and everything was fine. And what we did was stupidly forget that the guardrail color was not ever spec'd anywhere. And so the job was finished, and then they came in and they put in the guardrail, and it was bright, shiny aluminum guardrail, and everybody was very unhappy. That comes from following standards and not sort of getting everything together in a package that works well. And so what I'm arguing for is that it's unhappy to have people finally, it's a public relations issue, I guess, that I'm talking about, or a public education issue, for people to understand what the roadway slopes and whatever are going to mean for them. If you're the Huey Dunks looking at it, or if you're Gene Goodman looking at it, or whatever, you don't want that to be a rude surprise. And so being able to understand that early on is often helpful in my experience. Anyhow, I've said enough, but 10-foot lanes, 2-foot shoulders, a drainage ditch, the ability to let grass grow on the shoulder is a good thing. It would look much more like Island Road on Sprucehead Island. Keeping some consistency between the Village Road area and the start of this new area. It will look weird if there's not some sort of consistency between the two. Is the town considering doing any top coating between the Village Road section and the Lobster Pound section? Or will they read as just two entirely separate, shiny black pavement in two different places and nothing in between? Consistency and an understanding of the road in its entirety, I think, would be really helpful.
I think so the paving plan for the town all along has been that Island Road was next on the hit parade. And it takes 3 or 4 years for us to do that. So I think that, if that answers your question, Julia.
Sure.
The process that we go through is that we fund the paving reserve, and then we spend it the next year, and then we fund, and so we pave and then we fund, and that's the practice that we've fallen into.
And when you say Island Road, do you mean Island Road up to the stop sign on the island?
Yes.
So the whole length you had planned to
yes.
repay.
Right. At least that's my understanding.
Island Road goes all the way down the hill to McClune's.
Yes, it does.
But anyway,
okay.
Paving would include all of it.
Could I, just a couple of quick comments, real quick. Number one is, there's only 3 roads in town that the town, not the state now, but the town puts center lines on, and that's Westbrook Street, Island Road, and
Waterman's Beach.
Waterman Beach.
Waterman's Beach. And that is a relatively new development, certainly within the time I've been here. And they only go on maybe once every 3 years, 4 years. Fog lines are even less. Go on even less. So I just wanted Andrew to be aware of that. It's not something we do on an annual basis by any means. The other thing is, I would check with Jerry Grissom, the road commissioner. I think that concrete is very, very much on the surface. That kept eroding there. He would patch it, and it would come loose, the second we had a little bit of rain. So I think he tried to fill it with a little bit of concrete to try to give it a little more stability, but I would check with Jerry Grissom. I don't think that's anything more than 8 inches deep there, or maybe 10 inches deep there. But check with him for sure. I think that's the case.
Quite often you find those little holes, and I've seen towns do just that. They put a flowable fill, it's a diggable concrete, I
Yeah,
kind of pour it.
I mean, I think he put patch in there 100 times and it came out in 2 days, you know, so.
Yeah.
Okay, John, you're next.
Thank you. If we could go back to Village Road, would like the engineer to consider developing an alternative there that closes the intersection as he's recommending, but which moves the connection to Island Road further away from the Huidong house. As it is now, the design wraps around their property. Can it be more, and we all understand the need to reconnect, just do it in a more gentle way. And you indicated that we have the option. This is a town road. Frankly, you're just, part of the recommendation would be to regrade the existing roadway as it needs to be to connect. But you could also close it down, Andrew. That seems to be your primary worry, that it's too wide, but it need not be so wide. It just needs to be moving away from the Huidong property rather than wrapping it.
That's a product of trying to get a vehicle. If you don't have a Y intersection like you do, you can't get a vehicle square to approach the Island Road. I mean, you can see we're not 90 degrees, but we're close. So we've kind of cheated here and put that at an angle. So you can't get a vehicle. So you want to increase the angle, because remember, people are coming from this direction and they're leaving this and going that way. Trucks aren't doing it, but pedestrians are. I've done it myself. You all have at some point, I'm sure. So you want to make sure you have a vehicle sitting here, you know, so if you look at that distance, there's 25 feet right there. And if you want to maintain a vehicle in that square to be able to access it and leave it, you have to end up shoving it up the page here, if you will. If we move it down here, we can't get a vehicle square or even in that section. So it becomes
Andrew,
a
I
little
don't
more.
see that actually. Your two red arrows would allow the entire intersection to shift southerly in between those two arrows that you've nicely outlined for us.
Well, you'd have two 90-degree turns then. So your road would come down like this and then bend, and then you try to bend again. It doesn't work. This is a challenge in its current location. And again, we're quite a ways off the Huidong's property. Here's the existing edge of the road where it currently is. So we're not encroaching into any of their property. We're going into this area to pick up the drainage anyways. So we have just cleaned up and opened that radius up to make it worthwhile. We can't continue to open this radius up if that's what the town's looking for. It seems to be a strong direction to maintain a wide open intersection. It goes against my engineering recommendations and guidelines. But if the town wants to put that in there, I'll put a note right on my plan that says they've requested an over wide entrance in this location, basically to get the liability off my shoulders. And we can put what you want in that situation, but I do not recommend
I don't really understand why it has to be a wide intersection. I would like to see you try to draft an alternative that has a not wide intersection, but is pulled away more. You could still get your T if it were moved to the south 20 feet.
I disagree. So there's a 30-foot length right there. You can't make that transition into the road. We're talking about a 62-foot long trailer. So your 62-foot long trailer,
maybe
that we talked about before, is going to be at an angle and it's going to block the entire intersection off. So you try to make it wide enough. You try to make it so you can get a 30-foot swing in there, so you can get a vehicle, you can get a trailer, you can get them off to the side and kind of square it up to the intersection before they transition. The what I'm not following is what's the desirability of moving the intersection down further? How does that help? What does that help?
Yeah, I don't understand the objection, John. What are you
The
trying to
whole
achieve?
intersection is objectionable to a number of people, including the Huey Dunks, and it's only being driven by the fact that you're raising the road and you're driving a new design, a new connector, and it talked essentially about excavating that entire area. It can be a gentle ramp onto Island Road, much like it is now, making the change in elevation that's required.
Well, I guess that's where I get confused, because I see that if we have an opportunity to make that intersection a safer intersection, at the same time save money for the town, I'm hard pressed to understand why we wouldn't do that. And I think, of course, if you don't believe that there's a safety issue, then that makes this point hard to sell. But if you do believe that, then
we have asked Sheriff Carroll.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about now. We're talking about,
asked
road safety standards that the state sets up. The fact that we haven't killed somebody there, I don't see as justification to not fix an unsafe condition. I'm one of those, and I've lived on Island Road, for over 30 years and driven down it sometimes numerous times a day. And I'm one of those that's come down Island Road and almost been hit by somebody coming out of the Village Road intersection. I haven't been, and I guess you could argue, well, gee, since I haven't been, there's really no need to fix it. But one of the things we did was move the stop sign a few years ago, because that was a complaint from residents that people weren't seeing the stop sign. It used to be on the left-hand side of the road, and we moved it to the right-hand side. I keep hearing this argument, but I guess I'm still confused by it.
Well, that's the diagram of the existing road. Andrew, can you just shorten that intersection?
I understand what you're saying, but you cannot shorten it. You need to keep this end. I can shorten it this way, which is exactly what I did. I pulled off this triangular piece that doesn't have a usable purpose. It's just a wide open paved area that's not wide enough for a car to sit unless they're facing in this direction. But if we shorten it down here, you can't make the transition back, and you've made too tight of a curve to actually make it usable to access Island Road or Village Road from this lane here. The trucks will be fine. They're not going to change. They'll have a nice straight drag, but you won't be able to make that turn back. If you would pay attention, if you pull into this road and see where you drive, you certainly don't come down here and then try to make a more than 90-degree turn and turn back on yourself to access the Village Road. I think that would make a heck of a mess there if you tried to do it that way. You turn here and you kind of try to cut the corner a little bit and pay attention to what's in those locations. So again, if the primary concern, what I haven't understood is the primary concern for this intersection. I've heard a lot of people kind of fired up about the intersection. If the primary is concerned to improve vehicular access for tractor trailer trucks, what I'm telling you is we can accomplish that with a T intersection. We can oversize it. We can increase these radiuses. Yes, they will have to slow down a little bit, but I think that's a good thing to go into a town road like that. But we're not going to make a situation that's going to be impossible to transition. They're not going to be backing up and turning. It's going to be a standard intersection that trucks can use on a regular basis without causing them heartache and heartburn, if you will. But other than that, I'm concerned as to why we would want to continue to pave that 135 feet wide. I haven't heard any real reason.
This is the $421,000 project, and $5,000 is not an issue of how to do this, handle this beach. There is the issue, I don't know. I do not see that the truck that you've shown there is a reasonable representation. The grant is to support the fishing economy. it would bring, and where that intersects with roads is about bringing bait, bringing fuel, and taking lobsters off the road. And some of those trucks are full-size 48-foot trucks, and they have a double right turn up at the end of 73 there.
And they make it
so
though,
they
right?
prefer to go out. I'm doubtful that they do make it, making it without getting into the opposite lanes.
No,
Those,
I hear that, and we can continue to open this radius up. But to have this extra pavement is not going to help anything. I'm fully aware what this road is used for. I'm fully aware a truck traverses that. But if this was anywhere else and it didn't exist like that, you would never consider putting a Y intersection like that. The primary goal is to slow the trucks down, it's to direct them, and it's to narrow your intersection to make it safer for everybody to see. You don't want to have a wide open intersection like that. I understand if they have to slow down, that's my job to encourage and recommend that to you for a safety concern to help control that traffic and the speed and the access that they come down there. I am confident, 100% confident we can make this work, and they can drive that truck around the corner. We've done tighter corners, 90-degree turns. This is quite a bit of asphalt. There's still 60 feet of asphalt here. We're not talking about turning it into your driveway. There's 60 feet of open asphalt here. If they can't make that turn with 60 feet of asphalt onto 22 feet of paved road, they need to reassess their license.
Andrew, you're showing the truck over the center line, the trailer over the center line, and you're showing the track of the truck using the 4-foot gravel curb to stay within the lane.
Correct. So as we know, when a trailer truck pulls onto that road, let me rephrase it, not that road because it's 132 feet wide, but any other road in the state, it will traverse into the center line of the road and back into the intersection to avoid pulling onto the shoulder, but it will cross the center line of the road in normal circumstances for those situations, for those 90-degree backwards hairpin turns that we have here.
That will be breaking down that asphalt right where the front tire of that truck is, without any question. But
what they'll do is they won't pull over that shoulder. They'll pull up and over and into that. I mean, we see 90-degree turns all the time. People pull off roads, take the parking lots 90 degrees, and they do it in 30 feet. They don't need 62 feet to do this. If your goal is to make it so they can drive faster through this intersection, we haven't achieved that. We have allowed them to make it through the intersection, but they just can't. They have to slow down. They can't make it faster through it.
Andrew, you're the expert. I guess we'll have to rely on you. But the grant specifically says that this will be good for the next 30 years, and the plan as it's shown allows for 10-foot connections. It will be immediately overtopped just like it is now. By shortening it, you have basically eliminated what you're trying to accomplish. Shortening the impacts, you call it.
By lowering the road elevation? So
you're showing a 10-foot elevation at the connection by the Huidong property.
Right, well, that's not the concern of the grant. The village road is not the concern of the grant. The grant is for Island Road.
Yeah, no, that's the Island Road, which shows at 10 feet.
So when we were here last time, the concern was we extended it too far down Village Road, and we didn't want to do impact to Village Road, so we changed it and we shortened it up. But the whole purpose here is to raise the road elevation. And in the Wood environmental report, and in the gentleman I've spoken to over at Wood, the goal is you can shore a road up in multiple ways by raising it in elevation and stabilizing the side slopes. So if we do a combination, which has been the goal, because we want to try to minimize the cost for this entire project. And we've achieved that by raising the road up 1.5 feet to close to 2 feet. If you look in here, it's somewhere in the middle of that. So we're looking at a 2040 if we all truly believe the sea level is going to rise 2 feet in 20 years. So we've tried to balance that and not go too overboard by continuing to raise this road up, 4 or 5 feet. We split the difference, put it at 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and then we're going to stabilize the side slopes so that if the time comes where the water does flood in there in 30 years, and it happens at 1% time in that 1 year, it'll be stabilized and won't get washed away. That's the primary concern. With the road in its current condition, it's all soft and the shoulders are soft. So when that water comes up in there, it starts to erode and starts to wear at that road in its current location. So getting it up out of the normal current flood elevation and buying us, 20, 30 years of freeboard if the sea level continues to rise seem to be the kind of the common ground in the middle, trying to maximize your dollar and minimize how much we have to raise this and try to balance it.
But it is a short-term solution, basically.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, short's a relative term. They've offered to take care of a significant portion of the grant, significant portion of the cost here. So that's, if you can get basically a 30-year solution out of a road that improves it and raises it up, again, maybe give them a little more time to continue to crunch those elevation data and see where we end up. It's not a short term when you're dealing with road construction and building these things.
Okay, it seems to me that this has been drained, and I don't see a conclusion other than a non-meeting of the minds on this in the offing. So can we move on without offending anyone?
I'm fine.
Chad.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Andrew, would it be possible for one of your surveyors to mark on the existing pavement where that line, where that proposed new line would be of the edge of the pavement?
Absolutely.
In the next few days. I don't mean tonight.
If we can do it, if somebody other than a surveyor can do it, I can tell you we can have it done there. I'll go down there myself and mark it with some pavement.
I mean, just, just so we could get a sense of what we're looking at down there. I mean, I have always thought that was just a huge, having been involved in, paving bids for the town of South Thomaston. I mean, there's a huge amount of pavement down there. I feel like it's ended 747 in there.
If you mark 30 feet, 20
I would just like to get a sense of how much pavement we're going to eliminate. And it's not easy pavement because it's handwork of some of it. I'd just like to get a sense of how much pavement we're going to eliminate over the next 50 years.
Well, we're going to eliminate 90 feet of pavement in a triangle.
We're talking a huge amount.
I mean, there it is right there. 92 feet from that point to about where the road is. Thank you. We have the radiuses and the flare outs there. And it's in a critical location, and we need this and want this area to redo our grading. We want this area to be able to pull that elevation up and minimize how much we have to regrade that road for that section. I understand the concern, but if somebody from the town or somebody wants to, you can measure these PDFs that are out there and around. They're all to scale. All you do is you click on this measurement tool here, you right click, and you change the scale ratio right here, and you can set it to whatever our plan is, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, and you can measure it yourself. So you can see right there.
It would just be interesting to me though if you folks could mark that. It doesn't, I don't, just little dash lines or something. Nothing.
If you want that marked and you want me to come down there, either myself or somebody, I can't commit the surveyors. They're pretty busy. They're booked out quite a ways. But I suspect I can either recruit somebody or I myself will go down one of these nights and do it to help you guys out and show you what we're thinking.
And again, nothing obnoxious, just some little dots every 6 feet or something.
Yeah, we have one of our technicians lives right in CAD technicians lives right in Owl's Head, so he's right down the road, and I have a feeling I can recruit him to give us a hand here. But remember, when that's painted out, that there's still going to be another 5 feet added to the other side as well.
I got it.
So there's 7 feet on the other side, roughly.
Yeah.
Okay. Chad?
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it. I have a quick question about that Village Road area before we get off that graphic right there. The area that we're talking about, that triangle that you just said is 90 something feet long.
Yeah.
And it says proposed area to be revegetated. I just want to make sure that whenever everybody's contemplating the costs of, what it would be to pave that area over, I just want to make sure people are contemplating the cost of revegetating that area. I don't know what the condition, Andrew, is that you're thinking of leaving that on the plans. But is it going to be, are you going to is it going to be gravel under there and you're going to add topsoil?
We'll pull that grade up enough to make sure we can get our shoreline stabilized, and then we'll transition it down. But we would loam and seed it and put Curlex over the top of that. Curlex is a Excelsior blanket that's made of like coconut straw and fiber, and you staple it down, and it allows water to run off it, run through it, and it won't erode the soil. And it should give it long enough time to establish the grass seed through there, even if we get snowstorms and, well, not in the winter, but even if we get rainstorms and other things that will erode it in the short term of things.
Okay, so that's
generally what we do.
I'm sorry. So that the cost of putting that on there is and seeding it like that is included in the budget.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
fine.
I mean, again, we didn't exactly have that little island drawn in there back in 2019. So we're looking at trying to estimate where all these things came from. I tried to pull this up before. I've lost my folder. Bear with me, and I will show you what we've done. Right here. So here's, I don't know who's seen or what, but here's the construction estimate letter. And this is where that number is. This is in that contingency. This is in some of these overlapped areas. We call for stabilizing the road, erosion control, loam and seed. And what we did is we probably went down the edge of the road. We calculated about 4 or 5 feet off the edge of the road where we weren't going to rip wrap it. And then we multiplied it by the linear length to try to carry a portion of the loam and seed and stabilization for that. So to tell you that we have exactly, whatever that square footage is, I forget off the top of my head now, but to have that included in this estimate that we did before any designs, it's not factual, but I think we have enough contingency in there. And I'm telling you right now, it's less expensive to loam, seed, and Curlex that than put pavement in there. Is it $3,452? I don't know, but it's a few $1,000s.
Yeah, and that was my point. I just want to make sure that when you're saying it's going to be $5,000 to $6,000 to repave that you would then reduce that by the amount of the revegetation cost.
Right, we're talking a few $100s offset. My true number for that section was like $4,500, and that's why I gave you that $4,000 to $6,000 range in there. So, ultimately, yes, you can probably pull about $500 out of there for loam and seed and other things that you wouldn't have to pay, that you would be paying for. So maybe it comes down to $3,500 to $5,500.
Okay, minor point. I just want to make that point. And then the other question I had for you was, there's been a couple mentions of the type of material that's going to be used in the shoulders. I think on the plans it says gravel.
Yes.
And then I heard you mention in a response to the person that works at the pound there that it's going to be paved.
No, their shoulder's paved.
The shoulder on that side.
It's the edge of their parking lot.
But
so there's no paved shoulders. The reason theirs is paved is because it's part of their parking lot. So we would pave that back just like we would pave the driveways that are adjacent to it. We pave these areas back as well. We wouldn't leave them gravel.
Okay, so but the note on your
into it. So in this location where they currently have pavement, we would pave that shoulder so it'd be flush with the parking lot there.
Okay,
That's
my concern there would be that as the trucks are, if it wasn't paved, if it was gravel, I think that shows that might show that on the plans, that as they're pulling their trucks out of there, they're gonna be burning that.
Oh, absolutely. No, that would be a disaster. I agree 100%. No, that needs to be paved. It all needs to be blended together and cleaned up. Absolutely.
Okay, so and some of this is maybe I'm forcing some details here, but when I look at your plans and it says limits of ledge removal, I hear your words saying we're going to try not to, we might not remove it. I would. It's a comment to you, Andrew, but it's a request of the select board members is that if there's a vote here, if there's an approval here, if there's a direction here, it's that this road segment, this project, exclude any ledge removal by any means. I mean, we can talk about potential methods or methodology behind removing ledge, whether it's saw cutting it or blasting it or hydraulic hammers. If the board says, Andrew, to you, hey, stay off that ledge, I don't want to see any plan that says removal of any ledge, a way will be figured out to keep that from happening. And that's what I would respectfully ask of the board is.
And to be fair, the board has said that they want to avoid ledge removal. They gave me that direction. What I'm cautioning is in a preliminary plan at this point, I just simply showed that edge along there as a potential for ledge removal. So just to make people aware. Ideally, we won't touch it, but the board has definitely said the wells are everybody's concerned about the wells. We want to make sure we don't do any ledge removal that we don't have to. I don't want to remove any of that ledge in there, but if there's a piece of ledge that's hanging on the edge and we can grab it with an excavator and snap it off and pull it out of there, then that's the ledge removal we're talking about at this point. If we want to avoid the hammers, the town can make that. We can put that on our plan, put that in our construction notes that no hammers will be used, no blasting will be done, and we can make field adjustments to avoid that ledge if needed. We're not tied down on this backside other than the permitting agencies wanting to keep us away and trying to balance our impacts to this parking lot. But we have some more room that we can continue to pull that road. So if we get into this and we have to make some adjustments, we can slide that road during construction over a little bit.
And that's what we would all, and certainly in the Seal Cove, in that whole area, and point of view is we would just strongly make that request and appreciate it more than you can imagine, just to have the board say, stay off the ledge.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, stay off the ledge. And that's probably our most major issue with this whole section of the road is, and that's why there's an attorney there, and that's why there's a national engineer there saying, please, hear us, please stay off that ledge. And so my other question, or my other, I guess, request of the board would be, besides having those notes on there saying at all costs stay off the ledge instead of limit of ledge removal, would be maybe to ask Andrew to and I don't know, Andrew, I appreciate if you say I've already done this, but take a real hard and real creative look to see if it's possible to shorten the length of that road, just like you done on the Village Road area. Get it away from the pound. I mean, I don't want. I mean, it's not my property, and I don't do business there. But I don't want those guys impacted. To push that road over on their property, and we don't want the ledge impacted there. So if the length of that road improvement can be shortened, I think it would eliminate a lot of these problems. And I heard you say that it goes that far by the pound because of the transition, but now you're lowering the road there, so the transition seemingly would go farther to the north, I guess. And again, I think that would eliminate a lot of problems, especially with dealing with the pound, because I would imagine they're not going to be super happy about giving up some of their parking lot.
Right. No, I think we can continue to work with them at minimizing those impacts. Like I said, I think we can split the difference. We can't come any closer. You can see what we're dealing with here. If we come closer, we're against the ledge. But if the town decides, hey, let's go within 2 feet of that ledge on this corner and pull it out around the rest of it, then we can make it happen.
Yeah, and then my last request would be just that the board would really take a hard look and help everyone out there by allowing some deviation from the standards. Andrew, I appreciate what the engineering standards are and why they're there and why you have to propose them. But if we did narrow maybe the width of the road a little bit, maybe the width of those shoulders a little bit, I think it could go an amazingly long way in getting rid of the rest of these issues that we have on this this segment of the road. Well, that's it for me.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pam is up next. Where are you, Pam?
Yeah. Hey, first I wanted to thank the selectmen for having this Zoom meeting. always very entertaining and educational. Well, it's kind of like a continuation of politics, you know. I mean, there's a lot of things being said and blah, 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 blah. About the Island Villas Road intersection, the few things I'm interested about is where the snowplow guy is going to dump their snow now, if you're going to eliminate that, try and get rid of that spot to dump it. And what's going to happen to all the sand and salt that washes off the roads now, both Island Road and Village Road, that accumulates in that exact same green area. Like right now, there is probably about 1.5 feet of sand on the edge there from the last 5 or 6 years. And if you're going to raise the road in that section, is it going to accumulate right in the dip that gets created before you start raising the road? Just curiosity question. And then finally, I am totally amazed on how many brilliant, caring people live in this town. That's all I got to say about the whole thing. So I would like an answer on my sand and snow, and that's it. I'm good.
Thanks,
One of the
Go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
One of the most effective measures for sand and salt is a grass buffer strip, actually. So you allow the sand and salt to enter that strip along the edge, and it either dissipates or gets picked up by it, or you end up cleaning it up off the edge. So I know that is going to ultimately be the low spot. We're going to direct the snow to that area. We direct the sand and salt to that area. So it would end up filling in those areas, and they would have to be maintained and picked up if there's an overabundance of it. Looking up this low spot, there will not be a low spot in this section. This line's going to slide up a little bit here to clean that transition up. I didn't catch how far he put that, but I know we're not going to have an elevation 10 right before this. So this was more or less not getting that all cleaned up, looking at spot elevations and kind of rushing that process. But the road will transition down. It'll be a continuous slope, and then it'll kind of raise up through this section along there, and we'll try to take all the bumps and humps out of it to make it nice and smooth by the time we're done with the final designs. Did I answer all of them?
Okay, time will tell. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I couldn't agree with Adrian more. We have not, I think we've done a very poor job as a town at removing sand and salt berms, which not only in this area, but everywhere. And that is the worst thing you can do to your roads is not allow the water to get off the side. You know, when you let the water hit a sand and salt berm, it goes, you know, parallel to the road and it erodes. And any engineering, you know, folks will tell you about that. And that's something we need to focus more on. We do not do a good job at getting our sand and salt berms off in this town. And the last time we did it on Island Road was, God, I'm thinking 9-10 years ago. And it's really something we need to focus on.
That was 12 years ago, John.
All right, was it 12? It could be.
Oh yeah, 12.
We do a really poor job at that, and that damages our roads throughout town.
It's one of the highest pollutants into the environmental components around there as well. It pollutes the wetlands, pollutes the ocean, all these things we're trying to save, and we're letting that stuff run directly into it.
It's not that expensive. You just pull it back into the road, grader it up, and haul it away. Or in many places you can roll it off, but we do not do a good job at that.
Agreed.
Travis.
All right. I agree with the sand and salt problem, but is there any way, Andrew, that you can come down and meet with the manager of the dock or meet with us or actually put some paint lines down there so we can like really understand this? Because I think I put them in the right spot, but maybe I'm wrong. Is there some way that you could do that so we can know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you can give, Owen could probably give you my number and I could hook you up with Eric from the dock and all that. And that way we could have a better understanding of what's going on with how much you're going to encroach on that property.
Yeah, let me run a new road radius here and see what we can squeeze through, again, to minimize all the comments we've received, to kind of minimize what we're doing on this end. I'll pull it a little bit over here and try to reduce the impact to your parking. Hopefully, if I get it right, it'll be, we won't even notice what we're doing over there, quite honestly. So let me see what we can do, but absolutely give me a little bit of time here. But throughout this process, I'll reach out and we can meet right out there and do it.
All right. He'd certainly like to talk to you, but he's kind of tired from lugging all those traps all the last week here. So he didn't make the meeting tonight.
No, understandably so.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon.
Hello, am I on?
Yep.
My question is, we had asked for a minimum build design at the intersection of Island and Village Roads that showed leaving the existing roads where they are. Are we gonna get that?
My opinion is this is the minimalistic approach to the intersection. I know you disagree, but I think this is the least costly, the most efficient, and the safest approach to the intersection.
So we're not gonna get to see it leaving the roads where they are as we requested. Because our opinion is that the road isn't dangerous.
And I would just say, Andrew, I don't believe that question is for you to answer. That's a question for the board.
Yeah, I'll speak for my thought, Sharon, is that we can't leave the road the way it is because of the fact we're raising the road level up. And in order to do that, as Andrew tried to explain, that area that's now the wedge that we keep talking about is going to be eliminated, and it's going to be sloped to bring it up to the grade, the new grade. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't think leaving it the same is an option, and certainly not the low cost option.
Okay, my next things I guess are just comments. We keep talking about the new T and the road, the truck will be able to, make the swing, and it might only go over the center line a little, but we've left out the fact that that's at the bottom of a hill in both directions, which makes it more dangerous. My next comment is about paving or revegetating or whatever it is for this green area that nobody wants. And even if you vegetate it, put the coconut grass down, who's mowing it every single year? Who's maintaining it? Because John Spear's right. There's very little maintenance down here. I think the sides of the roads were mowed in August down here this year. So it's an annual expense too, as well as the build expense. And lastly, I would just say that the original design over by the pound talked about a land swap, removing electricity, blasting out ledge, with no talk about the exorbitant cost to do that. But then when we're talking about this little tiny green space, all of a sudden, the $5,000 seems to be a big issue. So that's just my comment. That's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands. So, John and Jan, do you have any wrap-up comments or motions?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for their involvement. I appreciated the passion and the discussion. I think it was very useful, for me as a selectman. I really appreciate Andrew's efforts and patience and time and his explanations. I think, that we obviously as a select board need to talk to Andrew a little bit more after this meeting, because I think there is some tweaking that we can do to this plan. I heard what was said about the ledge. Obviously that's a very difficult section because we've got really competing demands between encroachment on the lobsterman side, which of course is the principal reason we're making the road improvement, and encroaching upon the ledge to where we minimize the impact there. So it's a challenge, but I'm certainly willing to have continue this discussion. And again, thank you to everyone involved.
John?
Well, my own, actually, I have several thoughts, but I think we need to, I'm not prepared to make any motions. I think we need to absorb what we heard tonight. I think we've made a lot of progress. or at least I'm hopeful we have. But I do think that that we've really come together as a community. We heard the concerns expressed back on October 1st. I'm very pleased with the way it's gone, and I just feel a need to sort of take this all in stride for a few moments and not really make any decisions tonight. I need to think about this. I think Andrew did a great job. And I'd like to hear, I'm sure people will have some more email comments in the next few days. I'd like to hear those. So I guess I'm at this point, I'm in a holding pattern, and I will say that I am opposed to any blasting on the peninsula. I've come to that conclusion. I won't say that I'm opposed to any ledge removal. If it's something that could be pulled off with an excavator or something that could be done with I know now they could even drill down and put expanding material in just to peel ledge off. So I'm not going to sort of rule that out, but I don't want to see any blasting out there. I've come to that conclusion. So I just like to absorb this and think about it a little bit, and maybe schedule another meeting where we can talk with Andrew and finalize some things. And I kind of agree with Jan on that. So that's where I'm at.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. And it reminds me that all of us are smarter than any of us. I'm learning every day as part of this process. Some of you, if you've been to my house, you know that we blasted tons and tons of ledge in order to pour our foundation. And it was 20 feet or 40 feet away from the well. And our water's great. However, I walk out of here, actually I walked into it tonight, that if we screw up the wells, we probably screw them up forever. So that has been weighing on me ever since the first meeting. So I'm not going to ask for a vote on no ledge, but I think the sentiment or no blasting and no jackhammers, because I don't see the difference. So I think we walk out of here with a negative attitude towards blasting and ledge removal. And again, the learning will continue. There was one process question that I wanted to.
And whenever appropriate, I have two questions.
Go ahead while I think.
So one is between now and the next time you all meet, could I get some better guidance on asking Andrew or Gartley and Dorsky to spend a little bit of time looking at ledge removal options that do not involve the blasting or the hammering, and that you all, would allow some of the work to be expended on that. And then the other question that I had was, if I read it correctly, that October 1st motion does not allow me or anyone on the board to kind of communicate with the property owners themselves. And even though we're not talking about a similar situation, we still would need to involve them at some point in time. And so though the board might not be comfortable making motions on like decisions, could you all just consider that? Because until the next time you meet and bring that up, I can't communicate with the property owner about any sort of potential on their land.
Okay, well, the motion says that that all future meetings are going to be held by Zoom until we rescind that. And now I know what I was going to say. I don't know how many emails my colleagues have gotten, but I've gotten a lot of questions. And everybody should understand, first of all, that the best approach for the board to take is for us to respond to questions as a board rather than as individual board members. And that's kind of my preferred method. The challenge there is we cannot collaborate over email or telephone. So if we're going to deal with your questions, we have to deal with them in an open meeting. And I think these meetings are this kind of meeting going forward, just so everybody knows the right process, the legalities of the situation. So with that, I will entertain or accept or encourage a motion to adjourn.
I will so
Please.
move. Let's adjourn.
Thank you
Are
all.
you with us?
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. And your name?
I Spear.
Audio I.
Aye, Wrights. Good night, everyone.